The happy life of a fun seeker in Marvel. This video is purely for entertainment and does not infringe on copyrights or laws. The rights to the novel and image belong to the original author. We do not claim ownership. Don't like waiting and want to listen to this fanfic in full now? Subscribe to our Patreon, where you'll find the best fanfics. Chapter 376 The universe is a big world, come if you dare. Remember those little trinkets Sherlock and Tony stole from the Pictou clan's treasury? Initially, Sherlock thought of them as the scattered banknotes dropped by robbers during a bank robbery. Even the smallest amount was a fortune for the two men who didn't have much in their pockets. A mosquito's leg, no matter how small, is still meat, right? Sherlock wasn't above it. But what Sherlock didn't expect was that these items weren't just loose banknotes, but actually, loose solid petroleum. It wasn't until he returned to the black market that Sherlock learned that these items were called interstellar universal compressed energy blocks, the universal energy source for most spacecraft and weapons in the universe. Roughly 3 small blocks could power a small ship for a month. Initially, Sherlock was a little confused as to why the Pictou clan treasured these items in their vault, but he soon understood. According to Thanos, the universe's resources are limited, and the more life there is, the less it has to share. Therefore, for the sake of the universe's continuation and peace, he wants to destroy half of all life. So, treating this stuff as oil is perfectly reasonable. After all, even those who haven't left Earth understand the importance of energy, otherwise, there wouldn't be so many moles scrambling for oil, right? Since it's oil, nothing comes cheap. While a powerful figure like Thanos might not be interested in these things, Sherlock doesn't mind picking up bargains. With just a few pieces of this solid oil, Sherlock easily acquired the lightsaber and helmet he wanted, achieving his own small goal. Meanwhile, Tony was even more excited than Sherlock. After the final holy relic of the Pictou clan sold for a whopping price, Tony was even more excited. He embarked on a shopping spree on the black market, buying everything he could. Of course, Tony's primary goal was to upgrade his suit and spaceship. After spending a few days cooped up in his bedroom, Sherlock barely recognized it as his own ship when he emerged from the cabin. The biggest change was to the weapon system. While retaining a small portion of Earth's weaponry, the majority of the remaining equipment was now state-of-the-art alien energy weaponry. The energy supply system was upgraded. While retaining Tony's large arc reactor as the primary source of power, a new system using interstellar universal energy compression modules was added. Together, these two systems provided ample energy for the ship. Finally, there was the life support system. No one knew where Tony had gotten this thing, and they couldn't even fathom how it worked. As long as they could find a recipe and import it into the machine, it would print out a delicious dish exactly as it appeared. Honestly, Sherlock's cerebellum nearly withered when he looked at it. The inventor of this thing definitely deserved to be enshrined in the Imperial Temple. With this device, Sherlock and Tony's standard of living had clearly skyrocketed. The guy ate a wide variety of dishes. Especially Sherlock. He devoured every northeastern dish written into the criminal code in his past life, eating so much that he even felt like he'd gained weight. Of course, while enjoying life, the two of them didn't forget to complete their missions. After all, even if a couple had made their first fortune by scavenging purple sweet potato spirits, spaceships weren't cheap, so they naturally wouldn't just sit there and do nothing. Thanks to the fame gained from their first mission, the two of them became the perfect citizens of Los Santos in their subsequent missions. The guy had fought, stolen, robbed, and was a total jerk. He had become a complete outlaw, a true master of Zhang San's craft. Not to mention the countless blacklists they'd already been on, simply being hounded was a daily occurrence for them. Of course, during this time, Sherlock and Tony had also thoroughly witnessed the universe's diverse biodiversity, encountering all sorts of bizarre missions. Each mission still left a lasting impression on Sherlock and Tony. This was a mission specifically assigned to 2 individuals by name by a cosmic tycoon. The reason for this was that the tycoon was divorced, and his child was supposed to be raised by him. However, his wife, unruly, took most of the tycoon's wealth and their daughter and fled to a strange planet in the universe. The reason this planet was so strange was that it strictly prohibited all life except females. Exactly what you'd expect, no matter what kind of seed, no matter if it had any autonomous consciousness, as long as it was living, only females were allowed. Such a tough stance would have been met with the usual cosmic lunatics, but this female planet, backed by a powerful cosmic force and its own considerable strength, remained relatively unscathed. The tycoon's demand was that Sherlock and Tony retrieve his daughter. He likely had a hidden agenda by specifically requesting Sherlock and Tony to complete the mission, as they were nicknamed the Planet Destroyers. If they truly angered the two and destroyed the planet, that bitch would have nowhere to hide, and they would be able to recover their daughter. Honestly, when they saw the mission, Sherlock and Tony wanted to refuse, but the offer was too much. If they could complete the mission, he would give them all the wealth the wealthy woman had stolen. Tony roughly calculated that if they completed the mission, they could replace the ship's main gun. Then, this thing would no longer be a mere showpiece with the appearance of a star destroyer, but its power, but a full-fledged star destroyer. Ultimately, Sherlock and Tony gritted their teeth and accepted the mission. The first step to completing this mission was entering this planet, which only females could enter. Sherlock and Tony were scratching their heads off, but they couldn't figure out a way to do it. After all, the planet's defenses and inspections were extremely strict, and the consequences of being caught would be extremely serious. With news breaking every month of males captured and executed on this planet, the two couldn't afford to be careless. After much deliberation, Sherlock and Tony finally gritted their teeth and drank the polyjuice potion Sherlock had brought out. It was clear Sherlock's polyjuice potion was truly remarkable. The mission went smoothly. A clueless little girl and a spoiled wealthy woman were no match for Sherlock and Tony, two of the most powerful men in the universe, and they were quickly rescued from the planet. The reason this mission had left such a lasting impression on the two was simple: those high heels and skirts were simply unfit for human wear. God knows, on this alien planet, why would such inhumane things exist, especially when entering and exiting a female-only planet? Sherlock had emailed to protest, but the response was that it was a uniquely female talent, and that this practice would effectively eliminate the 65% of males who attempted to infiltrate the planet. The most important thing is that this requirement only applies to those who have passed the level. There are no rules about what to wear after entering or leaving. This really pissed Sherlock and Tony off. God knows how many times Sherlock and Tony sprained their ankles while secretly practicing to avoid being caught. The worst part is, after the two of them went through so much trouble to bring the person back, this unlucky rich man actually got back together with his ex-wife. It would be fine if they just got back together, but he even tried to cheat Sherlock and Tony out of their commission. Sherlock could tolerate it if he and Tony were just a weird play in your complicated love story, but if you want to cheat me out of my money, that's out of the question. Fortunately, Sherlock and Tony's guns were of a large caliber, and the rich man, faced with a barrel that was almost the size of his head, remained calm and honestly paid Sherlock and Tony's bill. Chapter 377: Species Diversity. It turns out Sherlock's prediction about the Tycoon's mission being bizarre was premature. Just a few days after the Tycoon's bizarre mission, Sherlock and Tony received another mission that appeared normal on the surface, but actually challenged Sherlock's understanding of species diversity. The mission was issued by a race called the Woodmen. Note, Woodmen, not treemen like Grote. Sherlock also saw what these so-called Woodmen actually looked like. They looked pretty much like humans, aside from their skin color, which resembled Big White at home, the extra eye on their foreheads, and the wooden-looking horns on their heads. Sherlock's eagerness to follow Tony to see the Woodmen was simple: they were a unique entity in the entire universe. Their love of wood was ingrained in their DNA, and they saw nothing but wood in their daily lives. The Woodmen's creations adhere to a consistent philosophy: if wood is feasible, use it. If dead wood isn't an option, use living wood. If living wood isn't an option, consider steel. Even with steel, they often coat it with wood to give the illusion of wood. If coating isn't feasible, they create a wood-like pattern on the steel's exterior. A prime example is their spacecraft. While spacecraft, for something like space travel, should be made of wood, the Woodmen's craft are truly remarkable. Cheaper Woodmen's spacecraft are made of steel with a wooden exterior. After all, spacecraft are cheap, and entering and exiting planets requires friction with the atmosphere. If they were made of wood, they would eventually burn out. However, more advanced spacecraft, those with anti-gravity systems, are completely clad in real wood. This allows for smooth entry and exit, eliminating the need for friction with the atmosphere. Sherlock was naturally curious about this wonder of the universe, but after actually seeing the Woodmen, Sherlock's assessment was that this race's technology was completely out of line. This time, the mission was actually simple. The Woodmen were overwhelmed, and needed Sherlock and Tony to go to a planet to help them recycle the wood they had planted. Of course, They might encounter resistance from the local indigenous people in the process. Sounds strange, doesn't it? It stands to reason that a race so fond of wood should be as peace-loving as the elves, but the truth is, the woodmen are the universe's most notorious bandits. Because of their excessive love for wood, the woodmen developed a giant tree, which they called the world tree. This tree is so tall that it absorbs a large amount of nutrients from the planet's land, causing a large area of land to eventually turn into desert. Crucially, this world tree possesses a degree of autonomous consciousness, capable of certain self-defense. For species that have entered interstellar civilization, this so-called self-defense is merely a matter of firing a few more shots. But for those who haven't, it's an absolute must-do. Honestly, after receiving this mission and seeing the woodman, Sherlock felt a strange sense of familiarity, even a vague sense of anticipation. It wasn't until they were on their way to the target planet that Sherlock realized why it felt so familiar. Holy crap, isn't this the plot from that little bastard Sherlock watched in his previous life, Legend of the Passionate Eyes? Thinking about it, those woodmen do bear a strong resemblance to the Otsutsuki clan from the anime. Holy crap. Could this mission be taking us to the planet where the Eyes legend resides? The Eyes legend's planet is actually within the Marvel universe? Doesn't that mean he can see Naruto? What the hell? Gather my shadow, you regret it. Is this a classic scene? Maybe with a bit of luck I'll even see my favorite adorable, weak, helpless, yet edible Hinata champ from my past life. Sherlock's imagination proved rosy, but reality is often harsh. Upon arriving at the target planet, the natives could indeed breathe fire, water, and even wind with a simple hand seal, but it had nothing to do with the legendary eye. Scans of their armor revealed that the fire and water-breathing abilities of these natives were due to their bodies appearing similar to humans, but they possessed 3 energy storage nons above their hearts. These stored the energy of 3 elements, and the size of each non dictated their specific abilities. As for the hand seals, Tony explained that they were pure self-hypnosis. Given their anatomy, they didn't need them. They should simply stand there, hands on their hips, and breathe whatever they wanted. The reason for the hand seals was simply to allow for the transmission of various skills and a certain level of self-hypnosis. Sherlock couldn't accept this outcome. He had originally hoped to experience the charm of the Eye legend, but now, not only was Sherlock's favorite lightning release completely absent, but even the hand seals were fake. Unable to bear it, Sherlock immediately stepped forward, using his armor's capabilities to demonstrate to the inexperienced natives what lightning release, Chidori, was all about. Essentially, the modified armor could hold plasma in its grip, relying on the high temperature to barely replicate Chidori's penetrating power. He also used the power of the Reality Stone to demonstrate Earth release. Sherlock immediately captivated the natives. They had never seen anything like it before, and were completely stunned. Sherlock didn't waste time. After captivating the natives, he immediately began to dazzle them with the chakra system from the Eye legend. The natives had never seen anyone as generous as Sherlock, and immediately dropped their guard and began to learn the chakra theory from Sherlock. The two groups, one daring to speak and the other to believe, found an inexplicable harmony. Even when Tony, having completed his work alone, approached Sherlock to leave, the natives seemed reluctant to leave, seemingly deeply grateful for the knowledge Sherlock had imparted. Sherlock had no idea that long after his departure, the mutants created by these natives, through years of self-hypnosis and environmental changes, had actually mutated into lightning-attributed energy non, and then earth-attributed energy non. Through unintentional natural selection, these natives had truly mastered the 5 escape techniques, just as Sherlock had imagined. They even advanced to the point of synthesizing the so-called bloodline limits according to the chakra instructions Sherlock had left behind. And Sherlock, this unforeseen figure, was treated as a myth by the natives who followed him, revered as a sage. As for the name, well, a little less edgy than the Six-Path Sage in the Eye legend, Sherlock was called the Chakra Sage, and later generations considered him the founder of chakra theory. What? Back then, those people with Sherlock's chakra instructions couldn't even master lightning and earth release. Did you ever doubt it? It's amazing to think about it, but who knows how stubborn these natives can be. Is that just an ability to practice? It's pure lack of talent. If they can't, change them. Stop hoarding the secret manual. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelis. There you'll find the original version of this story, and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 378, Mickey's House in Seconds or Not? As for what our chakra sage is up to now, well, after dealing with the Woodman tribe, Sherlock and Tony agreed to make a minor modification to their spaceship. The reason for this decision was simple: while their lives were exciting, they somehow felt a bit dry. Yes, a bit dry. As for what to do about it? In Sherlock's past life, a master named Ming had given him the solution. It doesn't matter if it's dry or lame, just talk it over. After all, they're like-minded. The guy feels uncomfortable if he doesn't act like a bitch for a day. While being pursued daily is exciting, it gets a bit boring after a while. So, the two of them decided to add a projection to the exterior of the spaceship. As for the content of the projection, well, what do you think these two idiots will come up with? Well, since Disney, the company with the most powerful legal department on Earth, doesn't have any space business, the two of them simply put Mickey Mouse on the projection. Honestly, Tony initially disagreed with Sherlock's proposal. After all, as a native Earthling, the image of Mickey Mouse seemed a bit childish to him. But it was precisely this childish image, coupled with the voiceover Sherlock had found, that suddenly took on a sinister, almost violent quality. After the modified spaceship was pursued by those forces, a 3D projection of a sinister Mickey Mouse would appear from the roof of Sherlock's ship, shouting at the enemies behind him via full band radio. "Hey, what are you looking at? It's me. Your dad. Do you want to come into your dad's Mickey Mouse house? What, you want to come in? Come after me. Come on, just say some dirty talk to me and you'll come in. Muska, you can't handle it." To further enhance the image, the moment this sinister Mickey Mouse appeared, a projection would appear on Sherlock's ship, reading the words Mickey Mouse House in the universal language. That wasn't the worst of it. The worst was that if these people actually caught up with Sherlock and his crew, the wonderful house on board would instantly transform into the unwanted house. Mickey Mouse's cry also became, "Hey, you really want to get into your dad's wonderful house? You wrestle me, your dad? Come on, try to wrestle, you little bastards." It was a barrage of insults, infuriating the pursuers. If they couldn't catch up, they'd be furious. If they did, they'd have to fight, and then they'd have to endure the insults all the while. Either way, it was excruciating. Of course, when the enemy was frustrated, Sherlock and Tony were energized, and their arrogance grew. The more arrogant they became, the angrier the pursuers became, and the angrier they became, the more wanted they became. A more wanted person meant greater fame, and greater fame meant greater profits. Of course, fame wasn't always a good thing. There were always those foolish enough to try to gain fame by running up to them. While Tony, a player so clueless and unpretentious, could easily handle this, the two grew weary of it over time and ultimately decided to retire and return home after one more big win. The final mission they chose was a collector's quest, tasking them with venturing to a sacred site belonging to a cosmic race and retrieving a so-called sacred object, a ball-like object. Similar to the original Pictou Clan mission, this one was anonymous. The issuer didn't care who accepted the quest, or how many people did. The mission's owner only cared about obtaining the object. Whoever brought it to him would receive the reward. For Sherlock and Tony, the quest was irrelevant, and they both accepted it with the goal of making a killing. However, Sherlock was surprised to see someone he hadn't anticipated as they cautiously infiltrated the supposed sacred site. That's right, that Star-Lord who looks so cool with the background music, but just plain stupid without it. Sherlock finally remembered why this mission always felt so familiar to him. Wasn't this the mission to seize the Power Stone at the beginning of Guardians of the Galaxy? Just as Tony was about to burst out of his hiding and deliver a War Machine-style punch to this idiot, Sherlock grabbed him just as he was about to act. Looking at Tony's puzzled face, Sherlock's expression was unusually serious. "Listen, Tony, let's abandon this mission. Just go buy some souvenirs as planned and go home. We don't need to do this mission." Tony was clearly skeptical of Sherlock's words. After all, the guy across from him, singing a tuneless song from the last century and dancing awkwardly, didn't look like someone Sherlock would be afraid of. Seeing Tony's conflicted expression as he glanced at the dancing Star-Lord and then back at himself, Sherlock knew Tony was reluctant to give up this lucrative mission. After a moment's thought, Sherlock solemnly addressed Tony. "Seriously, don't mess with this guy. It's not because he's incredibly powerful or has a formidable background, but getting too close to him will affect your intelligence. Are you kidding? After all, he looks just like any other idiot on Earth. Tony's initial reaction to Sherlock's claim was disbelief, but Sherlock quickly dashed Tony's hopes, continuing with a serious expression. No, I swear, it really will affect your intelligence. You know I can predict it. It will definitely affect your intelligence. I'm saying this because I've seen what his future teammates will be like. Tony's expression involuntarily changed at Sherlock's solemn words. After a fearful glance at Star-Lord, who was still dancing awkwardly, Tony grabbed Sherlock and began to leave without hesitation. Just kidding, I'm the smartest person on Earth, one of the few in the universe cursed by knowledge. Tony's most precious possession, besides Pepper Potts, is his extraordinary intelligence. If you want to make contact with Tony, you can go for his fame, his money, or even if you have a good relationship with him, you can go for his armor, but you can't go for Pepper Potts and his intelligence. Chapter 379, A Drama-Filled Shopping Trip. Fearing the consequences for his own intelligence, Tony, without hesitation, quietly left with Sherlock, just as they had come. They planned to go shopping and then return to Earth. After all, the two had only informed their families when they had escaped to let loose, without even consulting them. It was easy to imagine what they would face if they returned. Pepper's anger was truly terrifying, and anyone who saw it knew it. Why was she nicknamed Pepper? The planet they had chosen was Cheetah, one of the largest free trade zones in the area and one of the most prestigious shopping and entertainment destinations in the universe. They planned to buy some souvenirs before returning. After all, their apology gifts had already been purchased on the male-free female paradise, arguably the most sophisticated and comprehensive destination for women's products in the universe. Their main purpose for this trip to Cheetah was to buy some souvenirs and electronics to take back home, at least to keep Pepper from finding out about their past. Sherlock even swore that if Pepper Potts knew how infamously Tony and he were in the universe, Tony would be utterly mortified, even if he weren't dead. Of course, considering their daily blacklisting habits, even if Cheetah was a peaceful and open planet for free trade and entertainment, their dark elf disguises would have resulted in arrest. So, this time, they decided to travel in their natural forms. In a nearby asteroid belt, they restored their original appearances, donned their armor, and flew out of their spaceship. Sherlock then shrunk the spaceship and stuffed it into his library. After all, their spaceship was a calling card. Who knew if they had paraded through Cheetah's entrance in it, they would have been shot down. After entering the planet in their armor and following the normal procedures, they breathed a sigh of relief. Although their armor drew repeated scrutiny from the immigration officers, it wasn't uncommon in the universe. They simply let them go, dismissing them as fans of the infamous destroyer of the universe. Acting like good children, they immediately removed their suits, designed to survive the vacuum of space, in the sterilization room, following the laws of Zeta. They stowed them away in Sherlock's library, donning their regular clothes and truly embarking on this renowned shopping and entertainment destination. As they emerged from the space elevator and stepped onto Zeta's soil, they both breathed a sigh of relief, a reluctant sense of relief. After all, the lawlessness of life had lasted so long, and the occasional shift to law-abiding was still a bit of a chore. Of course, it was a bit of a chore, but shopping was necessary, and since they had plenty of money, they simply let loose, buying all sorts of unusual items. Besides electronics and souvenirs, Tony's main focus was on beautiful, functional decorative items, Pepper Potts' favorite. If relying on the cosmetics, clothes, bags, and jewelry bought from women's paradise could save him from death, then the remaining punishment depended on whether the small trinkets he bought on Cheetah Planet were effective enough to please Pepper and save her from death. As for Sherlock, he didn't have many thoughts. After all, his 5 uncles were pretty much used to his occasional wanderlust. Besides, men were always easier to please than women. Compared to Pepper's rage, which was harder to control than a pig during Chinese New Year, Sherlock's 5 uncles would at most round him up and give him a beating, and that would be the end of it. Of course, bringing them a gift they liked would also save them from punishment, and Sherlock could have prepared those gifts without even having to come to Cheetah Planet. It was nothing more than liquor and weapons. Sherlock had already bought several types of energy weapons and a large case of exotic liquor on the black market, sure to keep his 5 uncles beaming. To ensure absolutely no mistakes, Sherlock even bought 5 complete sets of women's cosmetics, clothing, and bags while infiltrating the women's paradise planet. He would then hand them over to the 5 straight men, asking them to please the Black Widow they were flirting with. This way, Sherlock could be absolutely sure of a safe outcome. The real headache for Sherlock was his 2 little girls. If he couldn't find something to please them, Sherlock's life would be truly miserable. Of course, Sherlock lucked out. In a store, he stumbled upon 2 little ducks, barely the height of basketballs. He was certain they would be a real delight for the little girls. The reason was simple: they looked an awful lot like Donald Duck and Daisy. After Sherlock dressed these intelligent creatures, the resemblance was even stronger. Even their quacks had a crackly, raspy voice like Donald Duck's, a truly remarkable sight. Of course, Tony was stunned by what he saw, even briefly wondering if Disney's legal department would target this thing if it actually appeared on Earth. It was only because Sherlock had the library and the ability to exchange Newt's suitcases endlessly that the 2 of them, seemingly procuring supplies, could have truly afforded to take all of this stuff back home. They arrived on Zeta empty-handed, and were still empty-handed, but Sherlock's library had 6 more suitcases. Tony kept rehearsing what he'd say to calm Pepper's temper when they got back, making Sherlock roll his eyes. As they marched toward the space elevator they'd come from, with unwavering defiance, Sherlock suddenly felt something slam into his back. Due to inertia, Sherlock didn't even have time to react before the immense force on his back hurled him forward. It's common knowledge that when people panic, especially when suddenly losing their balance, they instinctively try to grab onto something to cushion their fall. Sherlock was no exception. Caught off guard, he flailed his hands wildly in midair. Surprisingly, he actually managed to grab something, though he wasn't sure what it was. Before he could even drop the weight on his back, a teasing voice echoed from behind. "Good taste, bro." Heeding the voice's tone, Sherlock instinctively glanced up. He saw a pair of pink men's underwear emblazoned with Captain America's shield, and Tony, trembling slightly from the sudden brain freeze. And then, he realized what he'd grabbed in his panic: Tony's pants. Chapter 380, An Unexpected Way of Imprisonment. What happens when a person feels overwhelmed with shame and social annihilation? They become enraged, seeking to drag the person responsible for their social demise into a different universe. That's exactly how Sherlock feels right now. The story begins simply: Star-Lord, that idiot, arrives on a mission on the planet Cheetah and encounters Gamora. A scuffle ensues, and Rocket and Groot also attempt to seize the Power Stone from Star-Lord. Ultimately, Rocket is thrown carelessly by the Bard, crashing into Sherlock's back. Sherlock loses his balance, and in a flurry of scrabbling, he rips Tony's pants off in public. Well, even Sherlock himself wasn't expecting Tony to wear such underwear. The pink color highlights his girlish side. Most importantly, Tony, despite claiming to dislike Cap, wears Cap's logo on his underwear. It's safe to say that the rumors of a Tony and Cap pairing in a past life weren't groundless. Of course, compared to Sherlock's worry, Tony was far more bewildered. Especially after hearing Rocket's tasteful teasing, Tony felt a sharp ding in his head. It wasn't some system activating, but the sound of the string of reason snapping. Tony, with a scowl on his face, pulled up his pants in an instant, almost as fast as the Flash. Then, with a flick of his hands at his wrists, the Iron Man armor's gauntlets instantly covered Tony's wrists. Similarly, Iron Man's jet boots quickly appeared on Tony's feet. With the sound of charging power, Tony's face darkened. You all die today. Indeed, driven by shame and the prospect of social demise, Tony successfully lost his wits and joined the chaotic fray of the Guardians of the Galaxy. Sherlock, rising from the ground, turned and saw Star-Lord, Gamora, Rocket, and Groot, along with Tony, who was scowling and firing his hand cannons non-stop. He sighed helplessly. "See, I told you to stay away from these people. They're really affecting your IQ." After a helpless grumble, Sherlock could only shout, "Stop fighting." He pulled a stun gun from the library and joined the fray, attempting to mediate. As for the outcome, well, why don't you just look at the handcuffs and leg irons on Sherlock's hands and feet before you start to think about it? God knows why, the planet destroyer who was so lawless in the universe and even dared to make mockery of others would end up in jail for starting a fight on an unrelated shopping planet. It was bizarre. Despite Tony and Sherlock's desperate attempts to defend themselves as victims before the judge, it was to no avail. They were both imprisoned, along with the Guardians of the Galaxy. The only consolation was that their identities were kept relatively secret. No one knew who they were. Otherwise, they might have been shot right there, not jailed. Hey, Tony, smile. At least this is a novel experience, right? Sherlock, standing at the end of the line, said with a chuckle to Tony, who was walking in front of him with a sullen face. Tony said he really didn't want to bother with Sherlock. Even Rocket, standing in front of Tony, couldn't help but roll his eyes at Sherlock's words. But it wasn't Sherlock's fault. After all, this was Sherlock's first time in prison in his 2 lifetimes combined. It was quite novel, you know. Of course, since it was a prison, the guards took away everyone's equipment, except Sherlock. After all, Sherlock had all his valuables stored in his library. Sherlock had treated this time as a chance to experience life. But it turned out that Sherlock had been overthinking it. Well, everyone knows how awful prisons are in the Eagle Sauce area. Indeed, the Guardians of the Galaxy, Sherlock, and Tony had just been in prison when a big guy tried to make a move on Star-Lord. Fortunately, despite his stern appearance, Rocket was, well, quite a man of integrity. Under the threat of Groot's nucleic acid test, he boldly declared, "I'm protecting these people." Tony's expression brightened slightly, though not by much. After seeing how tough this group of inmates was, the other inmates gave up on bullying the newcomers. Sherlock and Tony felt relieved, finding a spacious cell and preparing to discuss their escape plan. To their surprise, just as they sat down and were about to speak, Rocket followed. Seeing them sit down, Rocket launched into a statement that was considered absurd in prison. "Hey, guys, I'm sorry to have gotten you into this. Don't worry, I'll get you out. This little prison is no big deal for Rocket. I'll be out in no time." Sherlock and Tony didn't take Rocket's words seriously, but the fact that Rocket had apologized did brighten Tony's mood. "It's okay. Sherlock and I would have escaped even if you hadn't told us. It would have been nice if Tony hadn't said anything." Rocket glanced at Tony once more, extending his paw towards him like a fellow traveler. "Rocket. What's your name, you good-tasting guy?" Tony's face, which had been good, darkened again when he heard the crisp Noodles address him, but he still shook Rocket's hand. Tony Stark. This is my nephew Sherlock." Sherlock instinctively rubbed Rocket on the head, successfully making Rocket's hair stand on end. However, Sherlock spoke to Rocket with a nonchalant air. "Hello, Mr. Crispy Noodles." Rocket, who was originally furious, froze for a moment when he heard Sherlock address him, seemingly a little confused. "What instant noodles? What the hell are instant noodles? My name is Fire." Before Rocket could finish his words, Sherlock waved his hands like a magic trick and 2 bags of raccoon instant noodles appeared in his hands. These were the snacks Sherlock bought during the last rabbit trip. He simply ignored Rocket's shouting and skillfully opened the bag and stuffed it into Rocket's hand. Hey, you know what? For Rocket, the taste of the instant noodles really attracted Rocket's attention. Sherlock also smiled and pointed at the 3 words raccoon on the package and said to Rocket, "Look at the raccoon instant noodles, isn't this you?" Rocket refuted Sherlock's slander while chewing the instant noodles handed to him with fascination. "Stop that nonsense. You, Rocket, have nothing to do with that plump-looking thing on this bag. But for the sake of what's it called? Oh, crispy noodles, pretty boy, eh? Rocket, we'll take care of your safety, thank you then," Sherlock said, smiling as he watched Crispy Noodles eat his noodles. Before he could even finish his thank you, he was rudely interrupted. Well, look what I found. Bringing in contraband and plotting an escape. Pretty boy, as long as you stay with me." The voice came from a gorilla-like figure on the upper bunk. He must have been sleeping there, woken by the others, and overheard their conversation, ready to get up and threaten them. But before he could finish his words, Sherlock, without even turning his head, casually pointed his right hand over his shoulder. A beam of red light, as thick as his arm, shot out from his finger. The gorilla, before he could even finish his words, was instantly crushed against the wall by Sherlock's spell and passed out. Chapter 381. 8 a.m. to 5 p.m., weekends off, food and accommodation included. After witnessing Sherlock's move, Rocket, unsurprisingly, froze. He even dropped his instant noodles and stared blankly at Sherlock. Sherlock, however, was polite, rubbing Rocket's furry head several times while he was still unaware. Eventually, Rocket finally reacted and addressed Sherlock with a goofy tone. "Hey, bro, how much do you want for that beam-shooting hand of yours?" After hearing Rocket's words, Sherlock seemed to have completed some ritual, a look of satisfaction on his face. After all, This move had already elevated Sherlock from a little gigolo to a brother, so what more could he ask for? Sherlock had finally experienced the treatment of a beefier brother today. Of course, Sherlock wasn't about to show off his impressive skills, simply smiling at Rocket. No matter how much money you pay, as expected, Rocket rolled his eyes in annoyance at Sherlock's response. Even the most clueless Rocket knew Sherlock was teasing him. Just listen to Sherlock's dash tone. After staring at Sherlock for a moment with an expression that looked like he was talking about a subway, an old man, or a cell phone, Rocket suddenly jumped down from the stool in the room, taking away the instant noodles Sherlock had placed on the table. He left with a simple, "Come to me if you need anything," and then departed with such grace, perfectly embodying Suze Himo's line, waving a sleeve, leaving no cloud behind. Only after Rocket left the cell did Sherlock finally put away the perverted expression he'd worn at the sight of a cute little animal. He used magic to throw the unconscious gorilla out, then cleaned up the bed with a shove before comfortably lying on Tony's upper bunk. Seeing Sherlock's frantic expression, Tony seemed a little anxious. After a moment's thought, he said to Sherlock, "Sherlock, Tony was interrupted before he could finish his words. "Tony, take a few days off and relax. Think of it as a vacation. And, trust me, if you don't want to lose your IQ, absolutely don't interact with those people." Of course, Rocket and the tree man are fine. After hearing Sherlock's words, Tony gave up the idea of going out to see what was going on with them. After all, Sherlock had said he could predict this, and all his predictions had come true, and Tony believed it without a doubt. Of course, he believed, but he couldn't just say it out loud. He immediately retorted, "No, I mean, give me that bed-clearing spell too. I just can't lie down with this." Sherlock just rolled his eyes helplessly, but it did fulfill Tony's little wish. After all, it was just a simple matter of turning over, right? As for why Sherlock was so wary of the Guardians of the Galaxy, there was a reason. In the past, as a fun-loving person, Sherlock really wanted to interact with these funny people. But now, Sherlock clutched the reality stone, the aura of death still lingering around him. He should be thankful this was the movie universe. If it were the comic book universe, Sherlock and Thanos would be locked in a vendetta over his wife and wealth. Furthermore, the man the Guardians of the Galaxy would soon face, Ronan, was a serious Thanos ally, and Sherlock didn't want to be associated with a jerk like that so soon. Sherlock was conscious of maintaining his intelligence advantage. Of course, there was another reason. Sherlock truly disliked those who couldn't even add up to a single brain. It was thanks to Rocket's high IQ that the average was even positive. Without Rocket, everyone would be completely clueless. And Sherlock truly didn't want to defeat his enemies by dancing awkwardly. Damn it, what was the difference between that and broadcasting his own shit live to the entire universe? Sherlock declared that he absolutely wouldn't do that. Intelligence didn't matter, the main thing was, it was simply too humiliating, and Sherlock couldn't handle it. After deciding on their next course of action, the two finally had some free time, living the life that every working person dreams of. From 8 a.m. to 5 p.m., with weekends off, food, shelter, and clothing provided, and a full-time job. What working person's life could compare? Of course, while they were both lazy, they weren't exactly idle. Tony, with nothing else to do, began observing Star-Lord and his friends, whom Sherlock had warned against excessive contact. But as Tony observed, he realized Sherlock was absolutely right. A guy who called himself Star-Lord looked like an Earthling, a woman covered in the color of forgiveness, and a sallow, grayish-looking guy covered in red streaks. It was just as Sherlock had predicted, affecting his intelligence. Tony watched helplessly as Gamora, once a relatively intelligent person, was slowly assimilated by Star-Lord. Then, as if suddenly realizing something, he abandoned his thoughts and would occasionally hang out with Star-Lord. Of course, despite his disdain, Tony was quite welcoming of Rocket and the Tree Man Groot. After all, Tony and Rocket could really get along, given that they were both engineers. Rocket seemed to have noticed this, and whenever he had time, he'd bring Groot to Tony's cell to discuss technical matters. The two of them had a plethora of brilliant ideas. Tony was like an engineer capable of creating something out of thin air, while Rocket was a master optimizer. Their abilities complemented each other perfectly, a level of compatibility that even surprised them. It wasn't about Sherlock's unique instant noodles. Absolutely not. It was about the technology. As for Groot, well, Groot also loved following Rocket to Tony and Sherlock, even though their first meeting was a bit of a joke when Tony, unaware of Groot's only response, said "I am Groot." Of course, that wasn't the main point. The main point was that Sherlock gave Groot a large bag of dragon dung mixed with golden cleavers on their first meeting after meeting him through Rocket. You have to know that Jinkla is a top-tier fertilizer in the Muggle world, and dragon dung is also a top-tier fertilizer in the magical world. Adding the two together, for Groot, a treeman, this stuff is a super delicacy comparable to a full-scale banquet. Later, every time Sherlock came to Groot, he would prepare a portion of this fertilizer for Groot. Groot's relationship with Sherlock grew closer, and every time he came, he would produce a small flower for Sherlock. In the end, it got to the point where Rocket was a little jealous, but seeing that Groot had grown visibly bigger thanks to Sherlock's fertilizer, Rocket just let it go. Chapter 382, Escape and Farewell. Of course, their pleasant days were interrupted shortly afterward. The reason was simple: the Guardians of the Galaxy began their own prison escape plan. As Rocket and Groot's friend, and the ultimate victim of their own group's brawl, Sherlock and Tony naturally wouldn't abandon them. However, if Sherlock were to comment on their escape plan, he'd have to say it was a perfectly executed Guardians of the Galaxy performance. And how could that even be called a prison break? It was pure emergency response to an emergency situation. A classic case of just do it, and most importantly, it's unknown who designed this prison. It's like where there's a dragon, there's a phoenix, and some brilliant mind actually follow the dragon's advice. And you actually have a massive energy cell embedded in the wall? What's going on? Just trying to challenge the height of other species in the universe? And Rocket, are you really that obsessed with these mechanical limbs? You even asked Star-Lord to go out and get a disabled person's prosthetic leg. Sherlock was speechless. What made Sherlock even more speechless was Star-Lord. This guy turned the door and ran back to beat up a prison guard who had surrendered, and took back his Walkman. In short, there were too many things to complain about, and they were too dense. Sherlock even wanted to complain at one point, but he felt so tired just thinking about it. But all in all, the few of them escaped very smoothly. Of course, the process of escaping was full of surprises. God knows why Rocket could make the prison escape pod feel like a roller coaster. Anyway, Sherlock's face had become extremely pale when he arrived at Star-Lord's spaceship, and he swore that he would never ride any means of transportation driven by Rocket in the future. Sherlock felt that no one else could make things in the universe feel like the night bus in Harry Potter. Of course, after arriving on Star-Lord's ship, Sherlock and Tony had no intention of continuing to tangle with Star-Lord and his gang. After Star-Lord completely escaped his pursuers, Sherlock and Tony almost immediately said goodbye. By the time the Guardians of the Galaxy focused on Sherlock and Tony, they had already changed into Tony's suits. After all, Star-Lord's ship wasn't very large, and there were only so many seats. If it weren't for the suit's grip on the ship's floor, Sherlock and Tony would have been lucky not to have bled. Feeling guilty for getting Sherlock and Tony into trouble with their group, Star-Lord and Rocket offered to take them back to Cheda, but they immediately refused. Ultimately, they found an asteroid belt to drop them off. The Guardians of the Galaxy inside the ship felt their perspectives shaken. After Sherlock and Tony emerged from the ship, powered by their suits, they flew far enough away from the Guardians' ship. With a flick of Sherlock's wrist, a spaceship the size of a basketball appeared in his hand. Before the Guardians could figure out why Sherlock had pulled out a model in such a remote place, the model-sized ship instantly transformed into a real ship several times its size. Even more astonishing, moments after Sherlock and Tony entered the ship, it began to move. They watched in wonder as a seemingly adorable, yet somehow cheesy, rat appeared atop their ship. The words meow meow woo were clearly visible on the ship's hull, and above them was a giant arrow, as if to prevent anyone from missing the inscription. The cheesy rat then waved at the bewildered crowd before dimensional warping and vanishing without a trace. Even the dumbest members of the Guardians of the Galaxy knew something was amiss. Even Star-Lord, a mercenary, instantly recognized the owner of this incredibly arrogant ship. Rocket, if I'm not mistaken, this ship could, perhaps, possibly, be that so-called planet destroyer that's been making all the fuss lately, Star-Lord asked, somewhat foolishly. But before Rocket could reply, Gamora, sitting behind him, couldn't help but frown, dismissing his idea. No, I heard those so-called planet destroyers are two dark elves. Thanos even wants to recruit these lawless dark elves into his ranks. They're definitely not the planet destroyers. Rocket rolled his eyes at the bickering before speaking. Come on, forget about it. It doesn't matter if they're planet destroyers or planet creators. I just know these two are right up my alley. They're my friends. That's all. I am Groot. Groot echoed Rocket, but sadly, aside from Rocket, the other three probably didn't quite grasp what Groot meant. The only one of the five who wasn't caught off guard was Drax the Destroyer. Sherlock and Tony were wreaking havoc in the universe, while Drax was busy with his daily routine, serving his sentence in prison. He had no idea Sherlock and Tony had earned a reputation this past month that would silence a baby. With a naive expression, he glanced at the four teammates sitting in front of him and said slowly, what are you talking about? Is dinner time? Honestly, I'm a little hungry. Drax's words successfully elicited a collective eye roll from the three men in front. As for Y3, it was because Groot doesn't roll his eyes. Almost immediately, the group abandoned their discussion about whether Sherlock and Tony were the so-called planet destroyers and turned their attention to another matter. Come on, I'll take you to find my buyer, Gamora said to Star-Lord and Rocket. After hearing Gamora's words and considering the long string of zeros after the 4 billion, Star-Lord didn't hesitate. He immediately stepped on the accelerator and flew towards the coordinates Gamora had given. Chapter 383 Returning Home. Sherlock didn't know what was happening with the Guardians of the Galaxy, and he didn't want to know. But one thing Sherlock was certain of, Tony was incredibly anxious to get back to Earth. And what was Sherlock supposed to do in the face of Tony's eagerness? Simple. Sit still in your seat, a mechanical, formulaic smile plastered on your face, and watch the incessant warnings on the screen, listening to the conversations between Jarvis and Tony in the cockpit. Jarvis kept warning Tony that the spaceship was on the verge of overloading, but Tony insisted he built the ship himself and knew its limits perfectly well. God knows why Tony could drive it through the vastness of space like a German Autobahn. That was Sherlock's feeling, anyway. He wondered how the ship's engines could withstand Tony's repeated space jumps. Of course, no matter how anxious Tony was, he was still conscious. Tony was no fool. With all the work he and Sherlock had accomplished in the past month, even the most shrewd of men would have shaken their heads. His ship would surely have long since become a household name among the major powers of the universe. So, despite his anxiety, Tony's first move was to head for the Dark Elves planet, the maternal planet on the star map. After landing, Sherlock was curious about what Spicy Chicken's hometown looked like, but sadly, it looked completely desolate. Apart from the Earth, nothing much else. It looked like, well, how should I put it, Mars with a filter? Beyond the grayish-black Earth, the sky lacked the bright, clear feeling of Earth. It was a murky, oppressive darkness. Sherlock wasn't exaggerating, only the Dark Elves could tolerate such an environment. For an Earthling, this place would be a literal haven for depression. Even the most extroverted person would be depressed for at most a month in this environment. Of course, while Sherlock was observing the surroundings like a tourist, Tony, on the other side, was bustling with activity. The moment he landed, Tony leaped from his captain's throne and quickly ran to the control panel. After a few moments of fiddling with the screen in front of him, a palm-sized device resembling a solid-state drive popped up next to it. Without hesitation, Tony pulled it out and tossed it into the trash can. He then pulled a new one from his pocket and inserted it, then rushed out with the steelworkers. Tony's maneuvers left Sherlock bewildered. Being completely clueless about such high-tech technology, Sherlock had no idea what Tony was doing and could only wait in the cockpit for him to finish. Fortunately, there was the attentive Jarvis to chat with, and through him, Sherlock finally understood what Tony was up to. First up is that solid-state drive-like gadget. To put it simply, it's a small device that combines a star map and friend or foe identification. It can display the ship's location, identify its home planet, and even create a star map of the universe centered on its home planet. Tony destroyed the star map that originally belonged to the Dark Elves, replacing it with a black market version he'd purchased that lacked any faction identification. As for why Tony rushed out with a steel construction team, the reason was simple: he needed to restore the ship's 3D projection function. Its original purpose was simply to simulate the surrounding environment, rendering the ship invisible to the naked eye. It was generally used to conceal the ship. The way Sherlock and Tony used it to tease their pursuers while they were out and about was a cult classic. Tony needed to reset this function to normal so he could get back to Earth. After all, Disney existed on Earth. If he really went after that dastardly Mickey Mouse and the Mickey Mouse house on the spaceship, even aliens would be sued to the bone by Disney's legal department. After all, Tony was an exceptionally talented engineer, having spent over a month in space training. Changing a projection was no big deal for him. In less than 10 minutes, Tony returned with the Iron Man suit he had just taken out. This time, Tony couldn't hide his smile, a smile even more uncontrollable than AK. He didn't even bother to see Sherlock sitting properly, and immediately launched the spaceship. To get back to Earth as quickly as possible, Tony even skipped through the atmosphere of the Dark Elves' home planet. Sherlock condemned him endlessly. It proved impossible to stop them, no matter how anxious they were. Although the Dark Elves' planet wasn't that far from Earth in space, with the help of a space jump, it took the two a full 24 hours to get back to Earth. They arrived back on Earth just in the middle of the day, and the entire training ground was taking a break. Sherlock, gazing down at his own training ground from midair, felt a wave of emotion. It felt as if everything had changed. The landing of their spaceship on the runway went unnoticed. After all, thanks to anti-gravity technology and 3D projection, it was virtually silent without the engines activating. What really alerted everyone at the training ground to Tony and Sherlock's return was the loud noise as the hangar doors opened. By the time the spaceship had landed, Sherlock's 5 uncles, Pepper Potts, and 2 young girls were already standing by the hangar, all armed. The guns were trained on the spaceship. After all, the two had left without alerting anyone. After more than a month of wandering in space, who knew whether the creatures disembarking from the spaceship were family or some strange creature? After all, many science fiction films feature aliens that parasitize their hosts, steal their memories, and then return to Earth to wreak havoc. As the hatch slowly opened, Sherlock and Tony emerged, smiling broadly, carrying 4 suitcases. Chapter 384, A Different Welcome Than Expected. The initially wary crowd lowered their weapons in unison after seeing the sly yet somewhat fearful smiles on their faces. They were certain it was the real thing. No other alien could replicate the sly demeanor they shared. Sherlock and Tony had planned to host a welcome reception for the two, after not seeing each other for so long. At the reception, the two would distribute the gifts they had brought back from their alien world. But the truth is, ideals are often beautiful, but reality is harsh. After confirming the two were the real thing, Pepper Potts, standing behind them, let out a piercing roar, then charged towards Tony, who was walking in front, telegraphing and clapping, expletives blocked. Tony. How dare you? percent at, percent, and, percent at? Do you know percent, and, percent? Tony's smirk froze as he watched Pepper, seemingly enraged, transforming into terror in an instant. Fear made Tony instinctively want to flee, but reason told him that if he dared to run, he'd be doomed. Ultimately, reason triumphed over fear, and Tony could only put on a cautious smile, bracing himself for Pepper's incoming punches. But to Tony's surprise, Pepper didn't immediately attack him, instead giving him a huge hug. This left Tony completely frozen in place. Just as he was about to put down the box he was holding and give Pepper a similar hug, she suddenly retreated from Tony's embrace. Her expression shifted from initial joy at meeting Tony to tigress fury in a split second. She grabbed Tony by the ear, scowling and dragging him out of the hangar without a word. Sherlock, having witnessed the entire incident, felt like he was on a roller coaster. Only after seeing Tony being carried off by Pepper Potts did he breathe a sigh of relief. What's that saying? You beat Tony up, so you can't beat me up again. Sherlock silently crossed Tony. Looking at Pepper Potts' expression, he knew Tony wouldn't be so easily coaxed this time. Hopefully, the gifts Tony brought back would satisfy Pepper Potts. Otherwise, the consequences, well, the mere thought of it gave Sherlock goosebumps. Sherlock had escaped Pepper Potts' clutches, but when he turned around, he saw his 5 uncles sneer at him. The 2 young women even cocked their rifles under Sherlock's gaze. Sherlock, initially relieved, suddenly felt his heart lift again. Fortunately, Sherlock did this sort of thing often, and his 5 uncles and the 2 young ladies were pretty much used to it. Furthermore, for Sherlock, his people were undoubtedly much easier to appease than Pepper Potts. Especially when Sherlock pulled out a variety of alien weaponry from the box, the sneers on Sherlock's 5 uncles' faces suddenly turned to surprise. No man could resist the allure of firearms, especially those from a foreign world he had never seen before. And when Sherlock pulled out the gift bag of alien wine he had prepared long ago, Sherlock's 5 uncles no longer complained about Sherlock simply sending a text message and then disappearing without a trace. The gift bag of feminine products then made Sherlock's 5 uncles blush even more. They no longer cared about the gifts themselves, clutching Sherlock's feminine products, making up a random excuse like "I remembered something," and vanished in a flash. Only the 2 more difficult young ladies remained. Sherlock naturally wasn't about to neglect the 2 girls. Did he see them already assembling their C4 while he was handing out gifts to the 5 uncles? Sherlock had no doubt that if his gifts didn't satisfy them, he'd inevitably engage in a chase and fight, tear-jerking drama. Luckily, the girls were still children, and couldn't resist cute things. The miniature, adorable Donald Duck and Daisy Sherlock brought back were a perfect match. Combined with a gift package of alien food Sherlock brought back, any resentment they might have harbored towards Sherlock vanished. Relaxed, the girls naturally began to take an interest in Sherlock's month-long space adventures. Sherlock saw, oh wow, a pillow right there, when sleepy as it is. He immediately recounted his legendary life to the girls. Even when he got excited, Sherlock would constantly pull out his collection for demonstrations to prove he wasn't just bragging. Half an hour later, Sherlock was practically in tears, sitting on the ground with a dejected look on his face, constantly berating himself for being so foolish and happy too soon. As for why this had happened, the reason was simple. Sherlock's 2 favorite Meow-Deo lightsabers had fallen prey to 2 young girls, who each snatched one away. And judging by the girls' expressions, it was clear that these 2 Meow-Deo-shaped lightsabers, whose blades were even taller than their height when unfolded, were much more appealing to them than the 2 pet ducks Sherlock had given them. What? You said you could refuse? Oh my god. Just ask the entire training ground who would dare to mess with these 2 truly beloved pets. Don't be fooled by these 2 little girls bossing around the trainees on the training ground. If they were ever bullied outside, believe it or not, that person would face retaliation from the Avengers, Black Widow, the military, and all the forces of the underworld and the white world. Aside from those mysterious individuals on the mystic side, these 2 little girls truly possess the most powerful backgrounds on Earth. Only Sherlock dared to tease them, and if he accidentally made them cry, he'd face the wrath of his 5 uncles. What could Sherlock do? Sherlock was also despairing. Having had his beloved stolen, Sherlock felt his dreams of preening shattered in an instant, but the 2 little girls' education was imminent. After all, what adorable little girl in the world would enjoy wielding swords and guns, or even just playing C4 for fun? If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelis. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 385 Trouble at the Door. After a long period of mental preparation for the loss of his beloved sword, Sherlock finally let it go. Of course, even though he let it go, he still had to collect the interest. So, Sherlock rubbed the 2 girls golden and green for a few times. It felt good. Under normal circumstances, Sherlock's actions would naturally receive fierce resistance from the 2 girls, but as the saying goes, you should be grateful for what you have received. The 2 girls gained stories, pets, and weapons, so they naturally gritted their teeth and endured it. Although they didn't say anything, every time Sherlock rubbed, the 2 girls would shamelessly take out their laser swords and wave them around for a while, even putting on a fake duel. Sherlock was heartbroken watching this. You know, he couldn't bear to let his beloved 2 swords clash like this. Even though the blades were lasers, it was still painful to watch. Finally, Sherlock couldn't stand the 2 girls returning a bitch's own bitch behavior. He laughed and ignored their silvery laughter as he quickly fled to his hut. What can I say? With such a deep sorrow, the only thing that could heal me was the adorable, soft, and fragrant little coal ball. Upon returning home, Sherlock unceremoniously picked up little coal ball, who was napping on the sofa, and began to suck her furiously. At first, little coal ball was quite doting on Sherlock, letting him suck her. But as Sherlock's behavior became more and more like a pervert than a cat lover, little coal ball began to get fed up with Sherlock's hairless monkey. After giving Sherlock a few gentle meow punches without extending his claws, little coal ball jumped out of Sherlock's arms and ran away, cursing. And, judging by the sound of her cries, little coal ball's curses were quite vulgar. But Sherlock didn't care. With 4 or 5 red cat paw prints on his face, He happily grabbed his toiletries and ran to his luxurious bathroom to enjoy himself. The human species is undoubtedly a scumbag, especially someone like Sherlock, who is an even more scumbag. While living in the exhilarating universe, where his head was tied to his belt, licking blood on the edge of a knife, and walking a tightrope, Sherlock missed his leisurely life at the training ground. Back then, he thought, how happy would he be back home, taking a bath every day, playing with cats, and bullying his own children? But after nearly a week of this leisurely life, Sherlock began to feel bored again. Especially when Tony, his kindred spirit, was away. Sherlock felt so bored that he was about to explode. What? Why did Tony disappear for an entire week? Well, it was simple. The last time she and Sherlock had just exchanged a text message and then wandered off into space for over a month, Pepper was furious. Really furious, the kind that no amount of Tony's gifts could appease. So, Pepper grounded Tony. Well, that's the usual tactic used by parents in America to deal with their rambunctious children. And it wasn't just grounding. Tony was confined to his villa. He wasn't allowed to leave, and no one was allowed to visit him, especially not Sherlock. You see, their villa at Sherlock's training ground wasn't like Tony's beachfront villa, with its garage for research. This villa had nothing. All Tony could do was work out in the gym, go for a run, and then watch TV and play games. Anyone else might have enjoyed this kind of life, but for Tony, it was a punishment. After all, forcing a mad scientist to stay away from his lab was enough to drive him over the edge. Sherlock had heard from the grapevine that this punishment was earned only after Tony had given countless gifts and behaved well that night. Otherwise, the punishment would have been far more severe. Sherlock had no problem with this, and he had even planned how to mock his beloved uncle. Ah, isn't this my underage uncle whose decades past his sell-by date? Sherlock eagerly anticipated the expression on Tony's face when he uttered this. But things don't always go as planned. It seemed as if fate had grown tired of Sherlock's subtle and self-deprecating behavior and had a major problem in store for him. At first, no one noticed the occasional patients looking to buy medicine at Sherlock's gun shop, which served as his family's front door. Unit 01 and Unit 02, the receptionists and cashiers, initially thought they were just straying. But as time went on, Unit 01 and Unit 02 began to sense something was amiss, the constant stream of people looking to buy medicine. The two robots quickly compiled a survey, noting that the number of people seeking medicine was increasing, and the frequency of repeat visits was also increasing. If this continued, it might disrupt the gun shop's operations. Without hesitation, the two robots generated a report and submitted it. Eventually, the report passed through Price's hands and reached Sherlock. Sherlock sat on his sofa, PS5 controller in one hand and the report in the other, looking at Price across from him with a constipated expression. Price, observing Sherlock's expression, seemed to have a plan in mind. He shrugged helplessly and said, "Don't look at me like that. After all, you're the only one in the entire training ground who's actually activated a healing skill. So now, go and solve this minor problem for me." Pressured by Price, Sherlock reluctantly closed the game, put on some clothes, and reluctantly headed towards the gun shop, which he hadn't visited in a while. "I'm going to see what's going on." It's impossible to say Sherlock wasn't a bit angry. After all, who would be so kind as to accept a pot from the sky when a pot falls from the sky? But soon, Sherlock's anger disappeared without a trace. The reason was simple. Sherlock discovered that, damn, treating illnesses is really making money. Chapter 386, Who the hell told you that I can cure diseases? Yes, Sherlock did need to deal with the people who came seeking treatment, but he soon discovered that many of them were wealthy and free, willing to pay whatever price they could for a good treatment. Sherlock was stunned. Oh, wasn't this just Chun Chun coming to pay Sherlock himself? He didn't bother to answer them, wondering how they'd figured out he could cure their ailments, which modern medicine couldn't treat. He immediately set up a small room in the gun shop's former lounge as a treatment room and announced he would only see one patient a day. Well, ideals are beautiful, but reality is harsh. He'd only see one patient a day, confining them in the so-called treatment room for 24 hours until the effects of the condition wore off and they were cured, and he'd pocket some extra cash. It was a win-win situation. But Sherlock forgot the inherent weakness of human nature, especially when it came to survival. After curing his first patient, he learned that Sherlock only saw one patient a day. The group of people seeking treatment nearly came to blows at Sherlock's doorstep. In less than a single night, A swarm of RVs, tents, and other overnight accommodations appeared outside Sherlock's gun shop. Every morning, whenever Sherlock showed up at the gun shop, the scene was like a gathering of a popular online star and his unhinged fans. The constant waving of their hands and the ferocious expressions of their heads, desperate to gain access, nearly gave Sherlock a fit of clamor. With no other options, Sherlock had Unit 01 create a small program overnight to keep these somewhat frantic patients in line. Of course, Sherlock couldn't let go of the registration fees. Within a week, Sherlock had discovered the truth: hospitals are really about making money. Hey, what does it mean to charge whatever price you want as long as they can cure the disease? Just 3 days, 3 people, and the cost of this so-called treatment exceeded Sherlock's gun shop's monthly sales. The most important thing is that there was a big boss who was afraid that Sherlock would be reported for practicing medicine illegally. No one knew what connections he had, but the next day he sent Sherlock a genuine PhD certificate from Harvard Medical School and a full set of medical qualification certificates with official seals. Sherlock was so confused by the whole operation. He just fed 3 people a mouthful of magic potion, and he became a doctor of medicine? And the kind with a certification, the kind that even if you go to check, you can't find any problems? I can only say that in the United States, money really can do whatever you want. But gradually, as time went by, Sherlock began to realize that something was wrong. Why are there so many difficult and complicated diseases? And these are some diseases that Sherlock has never heard of in his 2 lifetimes. God knows what kind of life Sherlock is living now. During the day, he sends one person to the treatment room, then calls the next person in and takes away all the medical records and examination reports of this person. Then he went home and looked up this ailment he'd never heard of in his entire medical collection, books as tall as his little girl. Once he understood what it was, Sherlock went to his library and searched the St. Mungo's Hospital Manual for treatments, looking for any records of how it was treated. Once he understood, he opened the potions manual and looked up the hidden corners of those potions he'd never heard of. He'd see how easy they were. If they were easy, he'd make them himself. If they were difficult, he'd just buy them from the vending machine. For a whole fortnight, the simplest case Sherlock had treated was a patient who'd been waiting in line 5 days earlier and had suffered a spinal injury and high paraplegia due to his love of extreme sports. Sherlock finally understood why someone in his past life said that anyone who persuaded someone to study medicine was a sin. Just look at the hell Sherlock had been living for the past fortnight. He rushed to the treatment room early in the morning, released yesterday's patient, then let today's patient in. He then administered a potion and cast a stunning spell, then called tomorrow's patient in. He then took the medical records and reports back to look up information in the books. This research took the entire day. Sherlock finally understood why all the doctors in the hospital ended up with the same Mediterranean hairstyle. Damn, even if they didn't have the gene, anyone would go bald with this approach. Now Sherlock truly admired those doctors who worked diligently and made healing their life's work. It really wasn't easy for them. Of course, he lamented, and made a lot of money, but Sherlock felt a surge of inexplicable anger that he couldn't vent. He was clearly a nobody, so how the hell had he ended up like this? Sherlock even felt that his life now was even harder than the 7 years of training he'd spent when he just traveled through time. Finally, Sherlock couldn't hold back. One morning, he grabbed a patient leaving the treatment room and began questioning them. "Who the hell told you I can heal people?" The answer surprised Sherlock immensely. New York City First People's Hospital. The doctors at Presbyterian Hospital told them. Upon hearing the news, Sherlock immediately suspended his treatment for the next day and drove straight to the First Hospital. Sherlock wanted to find out where these doctors had gotten this information. But Sherlock was completely surprised to be greeted upon arrival by the entire First Hospital's doctors. They even had a paper banner that read, "Welcome, Master, to your examination." The banner was crudely made, clearly a hastily crafted affair. But given their attitude, Sherlock couldn't afford to lose his temper. He simply sulked as these doctors, with their extremely respectful yet humble demeanor, escorted him to the reception room. The conversation with these doctors had left Sherlock completely bewildered. Listening to these doctors' nonsense about miracle cures and the blessing of the goddess of life, Sherlock briefly wondered if they were really talking about him. Was he truly that amazing? And the blessing of the goddess of life? How could he not know he possessed such power? Sherlock truly didn't know whether the goddess of life had such a blessing, but he was definitely under the gaze of the goddess of death. This didn't match what these doctors were saying. Could they have mistaken the patient? After brainstorming, Sherlock decisively questioned them. Could it be that these doctors had mistaken the patient? It would be disastrous to delay the patient's treatment. The doctors immediately denied Sherlock's claims. Some even offered Sherlock a plea, begging him to save the patients they had no hope of treating, leaving Sherlock feeling rather helpless. After much deliberation, Sherlock finally agreed. However, in exchange, Sherlock needed to know who was actually leaking the information, telling them he had the ability to cure these patients. Sherlock had initially assumed it was someone from SHIELD, Hydra, or even Black Egg, who had leaked the news. But Sherlock never imagined that the person who had leaked the information, and fabricated countless lies about him, would be his own uncle. Tony Stark. Sherlock, walking out of the hospital, gritted his teeth and shouted the culprit's name in his car. Chapter 387 Doing Business with Kamartaj. Now that Sherlock knew who had ripped him off, he would never let them off. Fortunately, Tony, whether fearing Sherlock's ridicule or for some other reason, often disappeared in his armor, often for entire days, making Sherlock rarely see him. Sherlock pressed the accelerator until it nearly burst into the tank as he rushed to his training grounds, already plotting his revenge on Tony. Once inside, Sherlock immediately summoned a suit from the Steel Engineering team and headed straight for Tony's first spaceship. Following Sherlock's orders, the construction suit quickly dismantled the food-generating machine on the ship. What? If it was dismantled, what would it do with it later? Haha, Sherlock didn't care, he could just go and get his food. Under Sherlock's command, the engineering suit installed the food-generating machine, which had been found on the ship, in the common area kitchen. Well, at least it freed Sherlock from the chore of cooking. While the food made by this gourmet food machine certainly couldn't compare to handmade dishes, it was convenient. And with its blend of Eastern and Western influences, it could quickly create anything with a recipe, a welcome bonus from Sherlock's training grounds. Of course, for now, this gadget was only accessible to Black Widow, Sherlock's 5 uncles, the Avengers, and their families. Revenge was taken, but the main problem remained. Sherlock still had to deal with countless patients daily. Even though he'd gotten revenge on Tony and gotten himself a small benefit, Sherlock remained indignant. Damn it, Tony had dealt him a huge blow this time. While he could heal, he wasn't a pure healer. If this continued, he might as well become one. I can't say much else, but Sherlock's greatest magical advancements lately have been in her medical magic and her potions. How could he possibly justify this? Lying in bed that night, Sherlock tossed and turned, trying to think of a solution. After all, if he didn't come up with a solution, his career as a doctor would be a dead end. Fortunately, Sherlock had a good memory, and in the early hours of the morning, he actually came up with a solution. If Sherlock remembered correctly, back in the first episode of Doctor Strange, a desperate Doctor Strange found a patient with a medical record of high paraplegia and wanted to know how he had regained his health. This former high paraplegic, who was playing basketball, gave Doctor Strange the address of Kamartaj, which allowed that long-faced Benedict Cumberbatch to successfully transition from doctor to magician. In other words, did Kamartaj actually have the ability to treat ailments that Muggles considered incurable? Plan worked. Sherlock decided to take a break from his medical practice tomorrow and go to Kamartaj to see if he could negotiate a deal. If Sherlock succeeded, Kamartaj would have no shortage of magicians, and he would be freed from the arduous medical workload. Of course, to say Sherlock isn't intimidated is sheer nonsense. The person Sherlock fears most in the entire Marvel universe, on Earth, is probably the Ancient One, the boiled egg. After all, he's a dead ringer for Dumbledore, constantly playing the Riddler. It's no exaggeration to say that with a time stone, if the Ancient One doesn't want you to know, even if she pulls your underwear out to see what color it is, you won't know. Sherlock feels like he has no secrets in front of the Ancient One. He even wonders if the Ancient One knows his XP. This is why Sherlock hasn't been able to go to Kamartaj to ask the Ancient One about the Reality Stone. After all, who wants to appear naked in front of someone? This time, Sherlock's been really driven crazy. Otherwise, Sherlock probably never wants to be in front of the Ancient One again. Of course, even now, Sherlock still held on to a glimmer of hope and made a decision that went against his ancestors. That's right, Sherlock planned to go to the New York Temple in Kamartaj to talk first. What if it worked out right away? The next morning, Sherlock got up early without sleeping for long and drove all the way to the New York Temple in Camartage. What Sherlock didn't expect was that when he arrived at the door of the New York Temple, the fat wizard king who used to play well with him was already waiting at the door of the temple. Seeing Sherlock get out of the car, the king's first words made Sherlock feel creepy, and the feeling of being naked in front of Ancient One suddenly appeared. "Good morning, Sherlock. The Sorcerer Supreme asked me to wait for you, saying you'll bring a groundbreaking revolution to Camartage." Hearing Wang's enthusiastic words, Sherlock's skin crawled with goosebumps. The time stone was a bit scary, but for the sake of his future, Sherlock forced a sly smile and followed Wang into the New York Temple. It's worth mentioning that this was Sherlock's first time at the New York Temple. The exterior of the temple resembled a typical church, but once inside, it was clear the decor and furnishings bore no resemblance to church. Wang wasted no time and immediately began discussing Sherlock's so-called business. The point was simple: Camartage would accept patients brought in by Sherlock, but only if Sherlock ensured they had magical talent. Sherlock wasn't responsible for their personalities. And even if these people's character does not pass Camartage's assessment, Camartage will find a way to treat them. Of course, the cost will definitely not be low. As for those who have no magical talent, Sherlock can only be responsible for the treatment. It has to be said that Camartage's routine this time is indeed a closed loop. It can not only guarantee Camartage's source of funds, but also ensure the increase in the number of magicians in Camartage, and Sherlock can also be liberated from the heavy medical work. Although I don't know why, Sherlock always has the illusion that if he agrees, he will be working for Camartage, but for the sake of his own beautiful salted fish life, Sherlock gritted his teeth and agreed to the agreement proposed by Wang. So the only question now is, how should Sherlock know whether this person has a talent for magic? Chapter 388, Camartage has developed to this point now? Wang simply laughed off Sherlock's concerns and didn't ask Sherlock to follow him. Without giving it much thought, Sherlock followed Wang around the New York Temple. It was clear that the entire New York Temple looked far larger than it appeared from the outside. While it was certain that Camartage wouldn't have the untraceable expansion spell within its own magical system, Sherlock could roughly guess how Camartage accomplished something similar. It was simple. Camartage's magic system already had a spell similar to the untraceable expansion spell. Yes, it was the same spell that was withdrawn from the movie due to its excessive cost, mirror space. However, mirror space couldn't simply hold the expanded space in place like the untraceable expansion spell. It required the use of extremely complex magical arrays to stabilize the expanded space. The reason the New York Temple's interior appeared so much larger than the exterior was primarily due to its unique nature as one of Camartage's three great temples protecting Earth. Furthermore, to Sherlock, the mirror space gave the entire New York Temple a distinctly maze-like feel. But it must be said, Camartage is truly wealthy. At least when it comes to magic, Camartage is undoubtedly the wealthiest magical group on Earth. Along the way, Sherlock couldn't stop glancing at the myriad magical items, each with its own unique function, leaving him dazzled. Remember, this is the New York Temple, not the main Camartage treasury. Who knows what new and wonderful things might be hidden within. Sherlock hadn't even offered to show him the last time he went. Damn, that boiled egg guy had hidden it all for himself. With a smile on his face, Sherlock followed the king to what looked like a warehouse, piled with countless objects covered in white cloth. If it weren't for the bright sunlight and the warm, inviting decor, the sheer volume of white cloth coverings alone would have made one feel like they were on the set of a horror film. Sadly, Wang didn't empathize with Sherlock. After leading Sherlock to the scene, Wang walked directly toward a towering object and removed the white cloth covering it, sending up a cloud of dust. The dust kicked up, effectively causing Wang, who had been trying to show off, to cough violently. He repeatedly slapped the air around him in an attempt to dispel the dust, which, combined with his chubby figure, created an inexplicable sense of humor. After watching the excitement for a while, Sherlock finally relented and gave Wang a cleanup, earning Wang a rather jealous rant. God, Sherlock, even though it's been so many times, I still have to say, your magic is incredibly convenient. Sherlock rolled his eyes helplessly at Wang's words, as if he didn't want to pay attention to him, and instead focused his gaze on the object Wang had tried to cover. Sherlock fell silent at the mere sight of it. The reason was simple. Damn it, are you sure this thing is a magical artifact and not one of those portal metal detectors you see everywhere in stadiums and airports? The only difference between this thing and that portal metal detector is the extra light bulb on the top, right? Even the material looks exactly the same, plastic. And most importantly, this thing would probably be frowned upon even if it were placed in an airport or any other venue. Look at that old-fashioned light bulb on the top, while the latest portal metal detectors have evolved to LEDs. You took me all this way, back and forth, just to show me an outdated, obsolete portal metal detector. After holding it in for a long time, Sherlock finally gave up on his urge to complain and launched into a merciless rant at Wang, who stood beside the thing with a smug look on his face. After hearing Sherlock's merciless rant, Wang rolled his eyes helplessly, giving Sherlock a look that said, "If you don't understand, then stop talking nonsense." He began to explain. "Don't talk nonsense. This is the latest magical artifact developed by Kamartaj. The wizards within Kamartaj have fully utilized their imaginations, combining magic with ordinary objects to create a brand new technology. We call it." Wang wasn't finished when Sherlock interrupted with a look of constipation. "Muggle artifact misuse? Or illegal Muggle artifact modification? Or the Weasley family's magical transformation methods? After all, Kamartaj has become like this now." It's no wonder Sherlock interrupted Wang to let his thoughts wander. After all, this thing looked just like the flying car in the Weasley family's house. Clearly, this world didn't have the Harry Potter masterpiece. Wang didn't understand Sherlock's ramblings. He stared at Sherlock in confusion for a moment before speaking with disdain. "Don't interrupt. What's with the Muggle thing? We call this magical technological modification, and what's in front of you is Kamartaj's magical compatibility detector. It tests the magical compatibility of everyone who passes through it. The stronger the compatibility, the brighter the bulb. Isn't that amazing?" After Wang finished speaking, he looked at Sherlock with a smug look on his face, as if expecting Sherlock to exaggerate. But instead of exaggerating, he was met with a merciless taunt. "So, what exactly is this thing for?" "To detect any reporters who have slipped into Kamartaj among its mages." Sherlock's taunt hit Wang's sore spot, and the pride on his face faded. His eyes began to swirl around, and he didn't dare look at Sherlock, so he could only stammer his answers. "So this thing is just sitting here gathering dust? Okay, forget all the details. While it's useless to Kamartaj, it's a huge help to you, isn't it?" Sherlock looked at the pretentious Wang with disdain, not even trying to hide the disdain in his eyes. Yes, you're right. So, can I take this thing back now?" Sherlock had no intention of continuing to argue with Wang. It was just too much drama. Chapter 389, Kamartaj's only researcher? I can't say anything else, but there is one thing Sherlock is very sure of, that is, the thing in front of him is definitely a work of alchemy, but the level of alchemy, how to describe it? It's like the dumbest child among the alchemy teacher's disciples, with a muddled attitude, just made the first work. In summary, it relies on the defense. And what makes Sherlock most want to complain but can't say it, and finally it hurts his teeth. What makes him feel so uncomfortable is that he can't change this thing himself. As for why it can't be changed, there are actually two reasons. First, because Sherlock's magic system is really different from Kamartaj's magic system. Sherlock really doesn't know how Kamartaj determines whether a person has the talent to learn magic. After all, Sherlock's magic is a pure talent-based magic. If you are born without it, then there is a high probability that you will be a Muggle for the rest of your life. Crucially, Sherlock couldn't bring himself to ask about this thing. After all, at the most basic level, it was just a criterion for judgment, not a secret held by gods or demons. But at the most fundamental level, it involved determining talent, even a matter of inheritance. Sherlock wasn't ready to truly become a part of Kamartaj yet, and naturally didn't want to get himself into trouble, so he didn't ask. Secondly, and most crucially, according to Wang, the wizard who created this thing didn't even know how it worked. He couldn't even replicate it. So, according to Wang, it was best not to do anything to it, not even touch a single screw, and don't modify anything. Just use it if it works. If it breaks, it's impossible to fix. After hearing Wang's explanation, Sherlock was speechless. What the hell? Wasn't this just a bunch of bugs built into a system that somehow managed to function properly, even achieving the intended effect? Wow, Sherlock exclaimed. Is it pure power of imagination that has blessed me? Sherlock was also quite speechless about the alchemist. Putting aside the question of why someone studying this stuff wouldn't keep experimental records, just looking at your work made Sherlock feel like he'd seen an internet meme in a past life. A chemistry student was doing an experiment in class. Seeing that his classmates' reactants were similar to the dirt outside, he went to the flower bed outside to dig up a shovel full of dirt and submitted it as homework. But he never expected a follow-up. The teacher asked everyone to use the product to catalyze the reaction. Everyone failed, but his shovelful of dirt succeeded. Now the teacher asked him to write a lab report summarizing his experience and sharing his success with his classmates. He was dumbfounded. Sherlock thought this alchemist of camartage was no different from the student. If he were his teacher, he would definitely point his finger at him and scold him for hours without repeating himself. But in the end, Sherlock gave up on the idea. After all, it was rare to find such a talented researcher among the melee mages of camartage. If he really let this guy down, the boiled egg lady would probably beat him for a whole day and night, then tie him to the crossbeam of camartage's gate for a week. Sherlock had no other strengths except for his own extreme self-control. So, Sherlock decisively suppressed his inner pedantic urge and, with a sullen face, used the levitation spell to move the thing into the back of his car. As Wang stood at the temple gate like an old woman, waving a handkerchief and reluctantly leaving, Sherlock, with a sullen face, almost stepped on the gas tank and fled. It was so damn embarrassing. After returning home, Sherlock decisively left a thesis at the door of his gun shop. But even if it was installed, it still needed to be modified. Even though the main body of this device couldn't be modified, that didn't mean it couldn't be equipped with some peripherals, right? Sherlock used transfiguration and some spare parts to create a small gadget, a plastic sleeve that fits snugly over the top bulb, complete with a built-in lumen meter. Simply place the device over the bulb, and whenever it lights up, the lumen meter inside the sleeve will detect a brightness, thereby determining the user's magical aptitude. All this data will be transmitted to the processors of the two robots via a wireless transmitter integrated into the sleeve. According to Sherlock's settings, if a certain threshold is reached, Unit 01 and Unit 02 will provide the approximate address of camartage, sending someone to seek treatment there. Of course, if the threshold isn't reached, that's fine too. Unit 01 and Unit 02 will collect the patient's medical records and files, which Sherlock will collect monthly and then collectively treat those unlucky individuals who weren't chosen by camartage. Of course, Sherlock, the sixth brother, wouldn't let himself get hurt. After all, everything hinged on this threshold, and Sherlock had set it to 1. In other words, unless the light bulb didn't light up at all, a complete magic insulator, the people seeking the cure would end up in camartage. Having taken care of everything, Sherlock watched from the shadows for a moment, then relaxed, whistling happily as he prepared to return to his den. As for the rest of the routine maintenance, Sherlock had already figured it out, leaving it to Black Widow and Hawkeye, the two idlers at the training ground. But Sherlock searched everywhere but couldn't find them. Not only Black Widow and Hawkeye, but even Antonia, who had been popping up to make her presence felt since Black Widow arrived at Sherlock's training ground, was nowhere to be found. After inquiring with his 5 uncles, Sherlock finally discovered where the others had gone. It turned out the captain had requested backup. As previously mentioned, Cap and Falcon were dedicated to combating the remnants of Hydra and investigating the whereabouts of their good friend, Badgie, in an effort to rescue him. However, things didn't go as planned. As the saying goes, a lean camel is bigger than a horse. Even though most of Hydra's leadership had been captured or executed, many remnants remained scattered across the globe. These contained a wide variety of personnel, facilities, and even sizes. Cap discovered numerous Hydra bases in the chaotic South American region, so numerous that Falcon and himself couldn't defeat them alone. In desperation, Cap requested the Avengers' assistance. Black Widow and Hawkeye, bored out of their minds at Sherlock's training grounds, naturally agreed to Cap's request. Black Widow even took her apprentice with her to train Antonia. Having her with Cap also allowed him to train Antonia in shield skills. As for why Tony became elusive after his house arrest ended, it was actually for this reason. Although Tony still said that he hated the captain, his body was very honest. When the captain was in trouble, he was the one who rushed forward without hesitation. Chapter 390 Anna, I need help. Of course, Sherlock wasn't interested in Hydra. After all, both Hydra and SHIELD were synonymous with trouble. Furthermore, being located in the untamed South American landscape, Sherlock could only imagine the sheer dehumanizing nature of Hydra's ruthlessness in that untamed land. The Hydra inside SHIELD headquarters were mostly engaged in scientific research, creating some overly powerful or insane gadgets, but the Hydra elsewhere, well, human experiments, were minor. After all, Sherlock considered these people's integrity to be on par with the Japanese. Expecting them to do human work was more realistic than hoping a dog could turn into human. At least dogs had the virtue of loyalty. And most importantly, since they hadn't contacted him, it meant they probably had no use for him at this stage. After all, Sherlock's wizard disguise represented arguably the most mysterious and powerful of the Avengers. It didn't take an anti-aircraft gun to kill a mosquito. Unsurprisingly, Sherlock slipped back into his usual lazy life, lost in gaming. His daily routine consisted of waking up, playing Fatal Company for some fun, eating, taking a bath, watching videos or watching TV, and finally going to bed. He lived a life that every working person could only dream of, a life that was truly enviable. But it seemed as if even the heavens couldn't bear to see Sherlock so comfortable, wanting to cause him some trouble. Not long into his comfortable days, someone Sherlock had almost forgotten called. "Sherlock, I need your help, Anna." The caller was Anna, the one with the face of a younger Anne Hathaway. Sherlock practically jumped off the sofa after receiving Anna's call, even feeling a little surreal. After all, Sherlock's only previous contact with a K, apart from the time he and Anna helped Black Widow, was the fact that there were a few K members among the trainees at the training ground. Help? What help? What happened? Where are you now, Anna? Sherlock peppered Anna with questions. After all, as Sherlock's first love since time travel, he still cared deeply about her. Hearing Sherlock's barrage of questions, Anna finally breathed a sigh of relief, her charming smile returning to her face as she gave Sherlock an address Sherlock hadn't expected. At the gate of his own training ground. Sherlock didn't waste any time, opening a portal and letting Anna directly into his living room to see what kind of help she needed. Anna, without hesitation, began to explain what had happened. The story was simple. Anna had tracked down a Russian arms dealer who was about to sell a weapon, a miniaturized nuclear bomb, to terrorists in the U.S. Upon learning of this, Anna immediately reported it to the higher-ups at the K. However, due to the recent transformation of SHIELD into SHIELD, the K was in the process of internal review, and they didn't have much manpower to support Anna. They had to improvise a small team to provide her with support. But this team, well, how can I describe it? In Anna's words, it's hard to describe. While each one is at the top of their game, each one is a bit of a quirk. Anna simply didn't have the confidence to lead this group of eccentrics to take down a cunning weapons dealer, so she had no choice but to contact Sherlock, hoping for his support. Originally, Sherlock had only thought of offering some help if possible, and if things got too complicated, he'd just give Anna some tools or potions. But after Anna finished speaking, Sherlock's interest peaked. Weird? Or was everyone a quirk? Sherlock couldn't even imagine how much fun such a team would bring. He patted his chest and declared, "I'll definitely help you. Let's see how it goes." Seeing Sherlock agree, Anna breathed a sigh of relief and immediately dragged Sherlock off. Sherlock didn't hesitate. After all, he had already tucked a lot of things away in his library, so there was no need to pack anything. They immediately got in the car and left. Half an hour later, Sherlock gazed at the airport before him, lost in thought. His past experiences in the Middle East resurfaced. After much deliberation, Sherlock cautiously inquired about Anna's destination. Anna wasted no time, handing Sherlock her plane ticket. Sherlock took a closer look. Wow, Las Vegas. There are two places in the United States that are incredibly famous for their entertainment. One is Florida, a place known for its whimsy. You can be broke, but you can't be broke. The other is Las Vegas. Unlike Florida, where you're quirky, Las Vegas is crazy. In this gambling-themed city, you can't really fit in without a little madness. In Las Vegas, any crazy encounter is normal. After all, you can't expect all the gamblers in a city to be normal, right? But, to be honest, Sherlock had never been to this famous gambling city since his time traveling. The reason was simple: Sherlock wasn't interested. After all, Sherlock could count the number of games he'd learned in his 2 lives combined on one hand. The only poker-related games he knew were Landlord, Doubt Is Who, and Old Turtle, Chu Lao Bai. He didn't even know how to play mahjong. That's right, Sherlock had been a pure rabbit in his previous life, But she or Sherlock didn't even know how to play mahjong, the rabbit's quintessential game. Knowing only Old Turtle and Landlord, Sherlock truly had no interest in Las Vegas. After all, no casino would have dedicated tables for them, and even if there were, with Sherlock's arrogance, he'd still lose. So, to Sherlock, this famous American city was just a place with super luxurious hotels. Of course, it was also a prime vacation destination for newlyweds in the US, a renowned entertainment destination, a place of both madness and romance. When he first traveled across time, Sherlock had imagined going there with his beloved. To Sherlock's surprise, he'd actually found himself in a place he'd never been before, just by chance. Don't say, under the blessing of these attributes of Las Vegas, Sherlock was quite looking forward to this trip. After all, few people can resist Anne Hathaway's beauty, right? But when Sherlock and Anna landed in Las Vegas, Sherlock realized that, well, he was too happy a little too early. Chapter 391, Human Species Diversity Award, Part 1. Honestly, Sherlock still harbored a lot of fantasies before the plane even landed. After all, at the training ground, Anna had been constantly complaining about the bizarre teammates Kay had assigned her. According to common sense, Anna, first of all, despised her teammates, and secondly, she'd come all the way to ask for his help. So, didn't that mean Anna would spend most of her time with him once they arrived in Las Vegas? Combined with the unique atmosphere of Las Vegas, Sherlock even felt like he was about to transform into Mr. and Mrs. Smith. Well, that's what Sherlock thought. But all of Sherlock's fantasies vanished when he saw Anna's teammates at the airport exit. What? How could Sherlock instantly identify Anna's so-called teammate among the crowd of people waiting to get to the airport? God, if you saw what Sherlock saw, you'd be instantly fixated on Anna's bizarre teammate, too. Imagine a towering figure, nearly 2 meters tall, weighing at least 200 kilograms, with dark skin, a massive beard, and a hideous scar across his face. She was wearing a Scottish-style skirt. And on top of that, a fucking tight sleeveless sweatshirt with the words "I fucking love skirts" printed on it. And then, baring his big white teeth and waving at you women? If Sherlock hadn't seen it with his own eyes, he'd have been utterly mad to imagine what this scene was like. But the most shocking thing was the feeling Sherlock got from the other people waiting at the station. Damn, he couldn't tell if they were used to this kind of thing, or if it was just par for the course in crazy Las Vegas. The locals around him didn't even bother to glance at this towering figure in a skirt. Not in the kind of awe-inspiring way they didn't dare to look, mind you, but rather the kind of indifferent, everyday disregard, as if such an oddity was just a normal occurrence for them. It had to be said that this was the first time in Sherlock's 2 lifetimes that he'd experienced cultural differences and the magical correctness of the American people. Sherlock felt his perspectives undergo a severe shock. However, as Anna approached the towering figure in the skirt, Sherlock realized that his shock was premature. After Anna led Sherlock to the effeminate man, Sherlock looked at Anna eagerly, took a deep breath, and then introduced her to Sherlock. Reinhardt Hopkins, the best support man in the combat unit of the K. He's a master with a machine gun, a man you can trust with your back. After introducing Reinhardt Hopkins, Anna turned to Reinhardt Hopkins and introduced Sherlock. Sherlock Phoenix, codename Magician, owner of the farm, is kind of my friend. Anna didn't reveal too much about Sherlock, just a rough outline. Even so, Reinhardt Hopkins was incredibly enthusiastic, extending his large, fan-like hand to Sherlock. Hello, Sherlock. I'm a support member of the Black Ops team, codename Black Panther. As you can see, I'm gay and a cross-dresser, so please don't mind. After hearing Reinhardt Hopkins's introduction, Sherlock was speechless. How should I put it? Although his appearance and behavior seemed a bit strange, he had a certain naivete. After forcing a friendly smile, Sherlock shook Reinhardt Hopkins' hand. Though outwardly calm, his heart was churning with emotion. He would never again look Wakanda's Black Panther in the face. Whenever Sherlock mentioned the word Black Panther, Reinhardt Hopkins popped into his mind. Who knew if Black Panther would come and silence Reinhardt Hopkins if he knew about this? After a brief handshake with Reinhardt Hopkins, the burly black man with so many elements, Sherlock discreetly put his arm around Anna's waist. Reinhardt Hopkins noticed Sherlock's gesture and gave her a "I understand" smile before turning and leading the two of them out of the airport. Anna, held by Sherlock's waist, didn't resist. With a sigh of resignation, she led Sherlock and Reinhardt Hopkins out of the airport. What? Why didn't Anna resist? God, Anna knew what Sherlock was thinking even with her heels. After all, in the K-world, Reinhard Hopkins's name was a household name. Any normal man who met him for the first time would instinctively embrace the woman around him and declare his sexual orientation. This was even more of a given in the K-world. After all, no normal man would be unfazed by Reinhard Hopkins, unless he was bigger than him. Outside the airport, a Yuhuang Emperor Escalade was parked. As they approached, Anna suddenly broke free from Sherlock's grasp and, without a word, dove into the passenger seat. Seeing this, Sherlock was completely paralyzed. After mentally imagining Anna in 108 different positions, he reluctantly opened the back door. However, Sherlock was surprised to hear a deep male voice as the door opened. It was filled with a deep, veiled sense of vicissitudes of life, yet even this intoxicating voice spoke in a truly servile manner. "Okay, baby, I'll definitely pay attention to what you say. Love you, baby. I'll bring you a gift when I get home. Don't worry, when have I ever lied to you?" At this point, Sherlock thought the voice belonged to a complete sycophant, but then the next words from the male voice made Sherlock's mouth twitch violently. "Okay, my dear baby, Daddy has promised you so many conditions, so you have to agree to one condition too, okay?" "What condition?" "Of course, stay away from those damn boys in your class. Trust Daddy, they're not good people." Yet, especially that little jerk named Charles. Sherlock looked in the direction of the voice and saw a man with golden hair in the driver's seat, holding a phone. It was this man who said these words. After trying hard to calm the twitching corners of his mouth, Sherlock obediently got into the back seat of the Escalade. When Sherlock sat down and closed the car door, he looked through the rearview mirror and saw the face of this man who was obsessed with his daughter. At one glance, Sherlock was completely stunned. Fuck. Brad Pitt. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelis. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 392, Human Species Diversity Rewards, Part 2. Seeing Sherlock's eyes fixed on the rearview mirror of the car, Reinhard Hopkins, who had just gotten in the car, almost guessed what Sherlock was thinking. He carefully approached Sherlock and whispered an introduction to Sherlock. "Brad Pitt, the best commando in the Black Ops team, codename, Sharp Knife. With him around, he can open up the way even for the most dangerous blockade, but as you can see, this guy's an out-and-out daughter slave. And don't look at him like this now, this guy's an out-and-out alcoholic, and he loves everything that involves drinking. Of course, this is not a bad thing. After all, if you really encounter a desperate situation, just whisper in this guy's ear that a boy named Charles has booked a room with your daughter in a hotel, and has prepared a drinking party full of strong liquor. This guy's combat effectiveness will increase several times. The more detailed your description, the stronger this guy's combat effectiveness will be." Listening to Reinhard Hopkins' words, Sherlock's mouth twitched constantly, and he even had a little too much to complain about for a while, and he didn't know where to start. Putting aside the fact that this guy has Brad Pitt's face and his name is actually Brad Pitt, just that last line, which is similar to "the beautiful swordsman has brought meat," is that really true? And judging by Reinhard Hopkins's appearance, this isn't the first time these guys have done this. The more detailed the description, the stronger the combat effectiveness. This isn't even One Piece. Sherlock was genuinely a little confused. Did the government specifically target eccentrics when recruiting? Now Sherlock really wanted to know the criteria for hiring. Eccentrics like this would be hard to find even if they were searching specifically. And according to Anna, there were 4 other people like Reinhard Hopkins and Brad Pitt. Sherlock glanced at Anna in the passenger seat with a hint of pity. No wonder Anna had been forced to call him. If it were him, he'd probably be shaking his Avengers. After a long while, Brad Pitt finally finished his call and greeted Sherlock through the rearview mirror. "Hey, handsome boy, I believe Reinhard introduced me to you just now. Just one thing, as long as you don't have any ideas about my daughter and stay at least 10 kilometers away from her, you'll be Brad Pitt's lifelong best friend." What could Sherlock say? He could only agree with a smile. God knows how beautiful this guy's daughter must be to be treated like this. Sherlock didn't understand, but was deeply shocked. Seeing Sherlock's agreement, Brad whistled and gave Sherlock a thumbs up. Then, under Sherlock's horrified gaze, He pulled out an open bottle of whiskey and downed half the bottle in one gulp. Dangerous behavior, please do not imitate. As Sherlock howled, don't drink and drive, don't drive after drinking. Driving unsafely will bring tears to your loved ones. He stepped on the accelerator and headed straight for the team's safe house. It is said that K is the second richest intelligence organization in the United States after SHIELD, but when Sherlock arrived at the place, he found out that K's so-called safe house was actually a luxurious private room on the top floor of the hotel. This private room was rented by K for a long time as a safe house for agents in Las Vegas. After all, it was large enough, the view was good enough, and most importantly, it was not noticeable enough. When Anna brought Sherlock, Brad, and Reinhardt into the room, Sherlock finally saw the remaining four weirdos that Anna had mentioned. After Sherlock walked in, he was immediately hugged by a woman, who even pressed Sherlock's face against her chest without saying anything. Sherlock didn't even react to what was happening before he felt a sense of suffocation, and heard a girl's somewhat crazy words in his ears. "Ahoho, where did you find this handsome boy? I'm going to marry him. He'll be my honey. Ho ha ho ha. Thank you, my dear teammates." By the time Anna and the other two reacted and rushed to pull Sherlock out of the crazy woman's arms, Sherlock's face was a bloodshot purple. Sherlock was furious and wanted to see who was so desperate that he wanted to suffocate a serious avenger like him. The sight of this made Sherlock completely stunned, and he even wondered if he had traveled to the next DC. The reason for this thought was simple: the one who had just attacked him was Harley Quinn from the DC movie Suicide Squad, which Sherlock had watched in his previous life before traveling through time. That's right, from the appearance to the voice, even the personality and the dress, it was exactly the same as Harley Quinn from Suicide Squad. Sherlock looked at Anna beside him, a question mark on his forehead, as if trying to figure out what the hell was going on. Anna took a long, deep breath, suppressed the urge to curse, and introduced her to Sherlock. Harley Quinn, K's chief technical support, code name, Harley Quinn, a super hacker capable of hacking into almost any electronic system, a complete nymphomaniac, and a marriage maniac. Sherlock, listen to me, don't be fooled by her appearance, she's a Yandir lunatic. Sherlock was completely stunned after hearing Anna's introduction. Holy crap, it really was Harley Quinn, even her name and codename were the exact same. Sherlock really wanted to know where K found these talents, comic conventions? After all, it's really hard to find someone with the same white skin as Harley Quinn in real life, except at comic conventions. Then again, Sherlock was beginning to suspect that K interviews weren't based on resumes, but on medical records. However, before Sherlock could recover from his shock, the door to the next room was suddenly pushed open, and an older naked man walked out carelessly, scratching his head as he walked, as if his nap was disturbed. Sherlock felt that his CPU was about to burn out. What the hell was going on? There were people here. Before Sherlock could react, the naked man raised his two middle fingers to Sherlock and the others, and started to scold them without caring about the fact that he had nothing to cover himself with. Fuck, what are you guys doing making so much noise over there? Don't you know that I'm taking a fucking nap? Do you have any sense of public morality? Sherlock's eyes almost fell to the ground, and his three views were severely shocked. He looked at the naked man who was jumping up and down and cursing, and then turned around and looked at him. Anna covered her face with her hands, feeling extremely tired, and introduced to Sherlock. Tom Yodel, K's top bomb disposal expert. Any bomb, this guy can disarm it. He's handled over 1,000 explosives without a single mistake. He has a lot of flaws, the biggest of which is his tendency to streak. Also, he has a history of drug overdoses. Listen to me. Never touch anything he's touched or passed to him. Sherlock was completely stunned, especially after hearing this name, which was only a few letters different from Voldemort's real name. Sherlock began to question his life. For some reason, Sherlock suddenly felt like Voldemort had retired and gone to a bar to do some striptease. Before Sherlock could say anything, a glass flew out from the sofa across the room and hit Tom squarely on the head as he was rapping, sending the elderly Tom falling asleep. Shut up. And, you pervert, get your fucking clothes on, a furious female voice echoed as Tom fell to the ground. The suddenness of the scene left Sherlock completely stunned. He instinctively turned his gaze in the direction of the flying glass, only to see a tall, slender woman with a sultry figure and pigtails sitting on the sofa, watching the farce. This time, Before Sherlock could even respond, Anna took the initiative to introduce them. Lara Crawford and Angelina Jolie, the most powerful sniper in the K, codenamed Twins. A sniper who doesn't need a spotter at all, but with obvious flaws. He's gay and has a serious interest in married women. Sherlock was completely speechless after hearing this. No, it should be said that Wu Yu's mother opened the door for Wu Yu, and Wu Yu had finally arrived. But Sherlock soon realized something was amiss. Why did this gender-swap thief have two names? Anna, seemingly aware of Sherlock's question, calmed her rapidly rising blood pressure before explaining. According to her own words, they are two souls, one being. However, according to the K psychiatrist's report, Laura suffers from an extremely rare split personality disorder, capable of controlling both personalities simultaneously. This is why she never uses her hand. After hearing Anna's explanation, Sherlock was completely stunned. This was a completely different path Sherlock had never imagined in his entire life. The world was truly amazing. Sherlock cast his gaze once again in amazement at Laura sitting on the sofa, but soon noticed something was amiss. Laura wasn't sitting on a cushion, but on someone who looked like they were tied up. Anna seemed to have noticed this too, and hurriedly rushed over to shoo Laura away and rescue the person from under her. Sherlock hadn't expected this person's first words after Anna removed the tape from his mouth. "Ah, Anna, my destined one, have you finally come to save me, the hero who will eventually save the world?" A strong sense of Chunyabaku, middle school second-year student, instantly emanated from the mouth of this mummy-like figure, wrapped in tape. Even the slightest trace of this mummy-like figure, so wrapped in tape, made Sherlock feel the Chunyabaku, middle school second-year student, vibe. One could only imagine what this guy would be like if he were free. Just as Sherlock's mouth twitched unconsciously, Reinhardt, who was following behind Sherlock, came up and introduced him. Bruce Wayne, codename Savior, K's best pilot. There's nothing he can't handle as long as it's worthy of being called a vehicle, but making his vehicle requires a strong heart. Because the characteristic of this guy's vehicle is that he has to scrap a vehicle every time he drives it. Well, it's the kind of scrapping that reaches the vehicle's limit. Another thing to note is that this guy is a psychopath. His brain is a little abnormal. He always likes to say some childish things. Well, he doesn't have a good relationship with Laura. If the two of them are alone together, they always fight, but he is usually the one who gets beaten. Sherlock didn't want to say anything more about this. Anyway, there was one thing Sherlock was sure of: K is indeed K. Normal people couldn't compete with SHIELD back then, so they actually found another way to go to the mental hospital to see the patient's case. 6. Chapter 393 Mission Briefing. Sherlock silently gave a thumbs up to this group of people, whose relationships rivaled those of a kindergarten class. Turning around, he saw Anna, mediating like a kindergarten teacher. At that moment, Sherlock finally understood. She hadn't come to him for help, but Anna's main reason was to find someone to clean up the mess. If Anna's description wasn't false, Sherlock was almost certain that relying solely on the abilities of these idiots, without Anna's supervision, the mission wouldn't be accomplished. It was a matter of whether they could turn the entire city upside down. After all, if any of these people were released individually, it would be a complete disaster for society as a whole. And the reason they had sought out Sherlock was simple: with the power of these idiots alone, ordinary people simply couldn't contain them. Looking across the world, the number of people or forces capable of stopping these idiots before they overturned the entire city could be counted on one hand. Before SHIELD was disbanded, there was only SHIELD. Now that it's disbanded, the only forces left are the Avengers and Camartage. Speaking of individuals, there are even fewer, at most 2.5. Boiled Egg Ancient One counts as one, Sherlock as one, and the later Scarlet Witch barely counts as half. Looking at the chaotic scene before him, Sherlock was starting to feel a headache. This wasn't what he'd initially imagined. Initially, Sherlock had heard about the weirdos and wanted to have some fun. But when the weirdos exceed a certain level, or when there are multiple of them, it's not fun anymore, it's a disaster. Sherlock felt a sense of turmoil, a reversal of fortune. He didn't know if it was because he, this naughty kid, had been so relentless in his taunting of the Avengers that even the heavens couldn't bear it anymore and had brought them all back to Sherlock. And now, 6 of these naughty kids like Sherlock had suddenly arrived. In response, Sherlock could only sing, "Listen to me, thank you." As it turned out, Sherlock's feelings were spot on. Anna spent nearly an hour calming down this group of people, whose interpersonal skills rivaled those of a kindergarten class, before embarking on the serious mission briefing. After introducing Sherlock's identity, Anna jumped straight to the point without missing a beat. As mentioned earlier, the main reason for this mission was Anna's discovery of a Russian arms dealer seeking to sell a miniaturized nuclear bomb in Las Vegas. While the bomb might not be very large, it's certainly powerful enough to flatten an entire city. But therein lay the problem. Anna only knew that the underground arms dealer, named Anton, was selling the bomb, but she had no idea what it looked like, who the buyer was, or when the transaction would take place. It was precisely because of this that this mission and this group of eccentric individuals came together. The good news was that, while Anton was a true Russian, he also possessed a playful and arrogant personality, and coincidentally, his business was well suited to his arrogance and playfulness. After all, when it comes to arms trading, there aren't any poor people. According to Anna's intelligence, Anton will arrive in Las Vegas in 3 days and host a grand private party. Anna suspects he'll use the occasion to sell the nuclear bomb he brought with him. Therefore, their primary mission is to infiltrate the party and monitor Anton, ensuring they can capture both him and the buyer, and seize the bomb. Anna's plan is simple. She, Brad, and Reinhardt, the more reliable, will disguise themselves as waiters and partygoers, sneaking in to get close to Anton. Sniper Laura will provide support and vision, Pilot Bruce will be on standby, providing firepower, and Harley Quinn will monitor all digital equipment on site and provide technical support. As for Tom, the bomb disposal expert who loves running around naked and now, under Anna's iron fist, is dressed in just shorts and a tie, looking as perverted as Fleck from One Piece, he will be responsible for its safety after it's captured, ensuring it doesn't detonate. As for Sherlock, well, according to Anna, Sherlock's role was to provide support wherever problems arose, essentially cleaning up after them. If everything went smoothly, Sherlock wouldn't have needed to be there. After arranging the tasks, Sherlock gave Anna a look that said, "We need to talk privately." After ensuring Anna understood, he ripped off his Harley Quinn pendant for the 8th time, threw it on the sofa, and headed for the door. After giving some instructions, Anna dismissed the group, threw the furious, aggressive Harley Quinn onto the sofa, and then followed Sherlock out of the room. Seeing Anna emerge, Sherlock's face darkened. "Oh my God, you need help? You need someone to clean up after you." But before Sherlock could say anything, Anna quickly clasped her hands together and, with a pitiful expression, began to apologize to Sherlock in a strangled voice. I'm sorry. This time it's my fault. You saw what these guys are like. I'm really afraid I can't control them. Please help, please help." Seeing Anna begging for forgiveness with the face of his goddess Anne Hathaway, Sherlock, a true ISP, finally relented and sighed helplessly. After a long moment of contemplation, Sherlock looked at Anna seriously and asked a question he had been wanting to ask for a long time. "Anna, tell me honestly, with this group of weirdos together, do you really have the ability to control them?" Anna was visibly stunned by Sherlock's question. After a moment, Anna sighed helplessly and explained to Sherlock. "No, you're overthinking it. Forget K, even SHIELD would probably be in trouble. Under normal circumstances, these people would never be allowed to get together. Reinhardt and Brad are members of the Black Ops team, Laura is the assassin for the Treadstone project, and Harley, Bruce, and Tom are all the trump cards of their respective departments and wouldn't be deployed lightly. It's just sheer bad luck this time. It coincided with a K's internal review, and the mission was urgent. And coincidentally, none of these people were suspected at all. So, a series of coincidences brought this group of idiots together." Chapter 394, Daily Drama in 3 Days. After listening to Anna's words, Sherlock pondered and finally expressed his understanding. Anna was absolutely right. Given these individuals' eccentric personalities, they definitely weren't Hydra members. After all, Hydra was merely ambitious and their actions were inhumane, but they weren't foolish at all. It was true that they were interested in recruiting talent, but compared to these inhumane individuals, Hydra preferred more normal individuals. After all, given these individuals' eccentric personalities, while they possessed powerful abilities, they also had obvious flaws. Just take Harley Quinn. If she were recruited into Hydra, if a handsome man were willing to risk his life to capture her heart and marry her, do you believe she would defect and become his personal spy? After all, the movie clearly illustrates what would happen if someone with the same personality as Harley Quinn found the Joker. Sherlock could only sigh silently, accepting the reality before him. He tried to keep his blood pressure down and try to interact with these oddballs. After all, there were still 3 days until the mission began. Honestly, as long as he didn't mess with these oddballs, there was actually quite a bit of fun to be had in those 3 days. First, let's talk about Tom Yoder, who bore a resemblance to Fleck. God knows why this old pervert, who looked to be in his 60s, was so popular in Las Vegas. For 3 days, he was either sleeping or running out to parties in nothing but his shorts and a tie. And he always brought back a group of beautiful young women to each party. If Anna hadn't been watching from this room, who knows what kind of mess this old pervert would have made. As for the pilot who shared Batman's name, but who would likely be considered a lifelong black mark by Batman, well, he was the most entertaining. He was in the advanced stages of his Chunibyo, second-year syndrome, and Sherlock loved to tease him whenever he could. After all, if you could follow his Chunibyo train of thought, you'd be surprised to find him incredibly entertaining. Especially when one day, Sherlock pulled out a lightsaber he'd found in space, secretly using magic to disguise himself as the Force, and when Bruce barely managed to demonstrate his ability to fling a lightsaber and have it return, this idiotic Batman practically fell to his knees and called Sherlock his godfather. From that day on, Bruce considered Sherlock the god of his life. As long as Sherlock used the excuse of teaching him the Force, he'd obey even more obediently than a well-trained military dog. He even went so far as to ignore Anna, treating Sherlock like a deity. Anna looked at Sherlock with undisguised disdain, a look that said, "Is it fun to tease an idiot?" But every time, Sherlock would say, "Interesting, super interesting, after all, what boy hasn't dreamed of becoming someone else's king as a child?" Sherlock never imagined that he'd actually experience that same feeling with this eccentric Bruce. If Sherlock had ever returned to normal, it was the time he'd asked this guy to drive him around. After he came back, Sherlock hadn't wanted to talk to him anymore. He also understood why our Reinhardt had told him that riding in this guy's vehicle required a lot of courage. Hey, what the hell was that called driving? That was pure low-flying. Sherlock had relied on his influence with Bruce to suppress him. Otherwise, Sherlock would have experienced the real-life GTA driving experience. As for the rest, there was nothing much to say. Reinhardt was as dazzling as ever. God knows where this towering black man found so many skirts that fit his figure. In just 3 days, Sherlock had seen him wear almost every skirt he knew, even sneaking a peek while adjusting his combat uniform. One look and Sherlock was completely stunned. Did he even know what a tactical kilt was? Sherlock hadn't known this before, but through Reinhardt, Sherlock found out. As for Brad, Reinhardt's teammate, well, Sherlock hadn't dared to mess with Brad for 3 days. No, it should be said that no one dared to mess with Brad. For 3 days, Brad's face was as dark as the bottom of his mother's pot. The reason was simple: Brad's wife agreed to let his daughter and her classmates go on a trip together. The destination was Las Vegas. Of course, this was only a small part of the reason. The real reason that made Brad want to kill someone was that there was a young man named Charles in the tour group. God knows what it must be like to watch Brad sitting on the sofa with a gloomy face, constantly repairing his weapons. Sherlock even swore that if this unfortunate guy named Charles appeared in front of Brad, Brad would definitely let him experience the 10 tortures of the Quinn dynasty. As for the remaining 2 women, well, let's talk about Laura first, or Angelina. After all, she is an extremely special schizophrenic who can control her body at the same time, and Sherlock is still very interested in her. After 3 days of observation, Sherlock finally understood why Laura didn't need a spotter. Damn, her 2 personalities could each control half of her body. Honestly, Sherlock was completely stunned when he saw this. After all, if you saw someone at the dinner table, each holding chopsticks in their own hands, eating their own food without a fight, and even had time for both personalities to chat and laugh with everyone, you'd be stunned, and marvel at the diversity of species and the wonders of nature. However, after 3 days of interaction, Sherlock could barely tell the difference between Laura and Angelina. Laura's voice was crisp, while Angelina's was a stark contrast. Sherlock couldn't figure out how the same voice could produce 2 completely different sounds, and switch so naturally. As for Harley, well, Harley was Sherlock's biggest headache. After all, he had to be constantly on guard against her sneak attacks or secret photos, and at one point, she even reached a point of desperation. Sherlock had developed a habit of using magic to check for eavesdroppers or secret cameras before going to bed, showering, or going to the bathroom. He also locked the door every time he went to the bathroom, showered, or went to bed. He also used magic to reinforce it twice. Meanwhile, any windows had to be locked, reinforced, and covered. After all, if he wasn't careful, this guy would really pounce on Sherlock. As for the daytime, well, Sherlock had almost gotten used to the feeling of having an extra accessory. Chapter 395 Mission begins. Facts have proven that anyone who makes it to the top of the industry, even if they have quirky personalities, isn't just a slacker. They can be anything in their daily lives, but when the action gets serious, they're all reliable. Anna, Brad, and Reinhardt infiltrated Anton's party with minimal effort. In the US, parties fall into two main categories, essentially similar to nightclubs and discos back home. One is the no-cost option, where the host posts a person at the door and charges a fee per person. Once inside, there are no other charges. The other is the wealthy option, where the host doesn't charge a fee. While there are still dormant, these are more symbolic. As long as you're old enough and appropriately dressed, you'll generally be allowed in. Of course, this doesn't mean that people like Anton don't have security. The VIP seats at the party, especially those near Anton, are always staffed by several bodyguards in suits who aren't attending the party. No one knew if any of Anton's men were among the revelers on the other side. As for how Anton, a Russian, could throw such a large-scale party in the US, the reason was simple. Anton, well off, hired a party company to handle everything. The remaining men and women who attended Anton's party tracked as the atmosphere were even easier to manage. Anton had the money, so he didn't care about one more or one less. With the all-consuming entertainment atmosphere in the US, it only took a few partygoers to gather a room full of people. That's how Anna and the other two got in. As they did, the entire team quickly surrounded them and began to deploy according to their plan, with the exception of Sherlock and Tom, the bomb disposal officer. Tom, however, completely surprised everyone. Figuring he didn't need to intervene initially, this guy, who definitely shared Frank's common ground, just walked into Anton's party in his underwear and a tie, just like Anna and the other two. By the time Anna spotted him, he looked even more like someone attending Anton's pool party than Anna and the others. Poor Anna and the others had been cautiously observing their surroundings the entire time, even refusing to touch the food and drinks at the party to better execute their mission. But look at Uncle Tom, cigarette in one hand, alcohol in the other, his arms around two girls, smiling so brightly that anyone who didn't know him would have thought he was the host. After a long mental foray, Anna finally ordered to simply ignore Tom. After all, until the nuclear bomb was confirmed, Tom wasn't really needed. As for Sherlock? Well, to be honest, Sherlock wasn't really interested in a party like this with no one he knew. Rather than a crazy party, Sherlock wanted to see the local culture inside the hotel. Of course, playing was out of the question. Sherlock, have a sworn enemy of gambling and drugs. Sherlock wasn't particularly interested in the game and didn't have the energy to learn the rules, which sounded so intimidating. The main reason for Sherlock's desire to visit was, firstly, that he had never seen a place like it in his 2 lifetimes combined, and secondly, because of all the Hong Kong movies he'd watched as a child before his time travel. Honestly, who hadn't watched movies starring Chow Yun-fat, Andy Lau, and Stephen Chow as a child? Sherlock even remembered Mark Ron with his slicked back hair, a neat suit, a trench coat, a white scarf, and a match in his mouth. The young Sherlock even thought it was the coolest look in the world. So much so that upon arriving in Las Vegas, Sherlock's first instinct was to see if there were any people like Mark Ron there. Unfortunately, Sherlock's plan fell apart before it even began because he overlooked a crucial factor, his own accessory, Harley Quinn. Before the mission even began, before Anna and the others had even managed to sneak in, Harley forcefully demanded that Sherlock accompany her in the technical support van. Sherlock, of course, refused. But with Harley practically threatening to kill herself, Sherlock finally decided to get her to the car and then go explore some more. But as soon as Harley opened the car's door, Sherlock's resentment and desire to expand his horizons vanished without a trace. The reason was simple: Sherlock saw something he simply couldn't refuse. 2 super luxurious 6-screen computers. No man could resist such a supercomputer. Sherlock decisively abandoned his plan and ran to the car to examine the computer's chassis. It wouldn't have mattered if he hadn't looked at it, But a closer look was enough to make Sherlock exclaim. A whole chassis of custom hardware. And inside, 3 unreleased NVIDIA cards capable of parallel crossfire without sacrificing performance. Damn, he knew Wang Laoxi had hidden something. Now, look. The netizens from his past life weren't kidding. Of course, Sherlock's surprise wasn't over yet. When Sherlock opened the computer, he practically fainted with happiness. You know, the internet in the US, especially at home, is, well, just usable. In some places, it's even worse than rural areas in China. But look at the internet in this car. I don't know what privileges or some crazy technology they've used to achieve 20 Gbps both upstream and downstream. Note that it's 20 Gbps, not 20 megabits per second. Do you know what 20 Gbps actually means? A 200 gigabytes game, if your hard drive is fast enough, can download in just 10 seconds. Damn, what man could resist such smooth Nova-like internet speeds? Sherlock couldn't do that. Harley even thoughtfully prepared a gaming keyboard, mouse, and even an Xbox Elite controller for Sherlock. What else could she say? Sherlock didn't say a word and just sat back to back with Harley. Harley was busy with her technical support, while Sherlock decisively started playing his own game. Genshin Impact, BA. Escape from Tarkov, start. By the time Sherlock actually opened the game, he felt completely elated. Do you know what full-on special effects and ray tracing mean? Do you know what 0 milliseconds latency means? Even Harley, the cutie, took 5 minutes to help Sherlock optimize the game assets. And the mission? What the hell? A bunch of idiot elites need my help? My mission now is to grab a big purple bag and a fully loaded AK, go down to the map, and take down every single boss on the map, then retreat to my safe house with a ton of loot. Chapter 396, Simple and Crude Task Process. In fact, according to the laws of the United States, organizations like the K have no domestic law enforcement authority. Logically, cases like Anton should be transferred to FABO. Unfortunately, the K and FABO have always been at odds. FABO sees the K as a group of lawless lunatics, while the K sees the FABO as a group of police officers handling robberies and kidnappings. In short, the two sides dislike each other, and gradually formed a strange tacit understanding, when it comes to domestic missions, regardless of which party has law enforcement authority and which doesn't, whoever discovers the mission first gets the mission. And Anna was the lucky person who discovered it first. It must be said that compared to the Avengers, the missions performed by the Marvel Cinematic Universe's K are almost as good as those of the police in Sherlock's opinion. The three of them wandered around the party for a while before they saw the target of the operation, Anton, appear. Anna simply pretended to be a hidden waitress at the party and successfully approached Anton without even arousing anyone's suspicion. Taking advantage of Anna's Anne Hathaway-like beauty, she even used the opportunity of exchanging phone numbers to install a Trojan program created by Harley on Anton's phone. Yes, it all seemed ridiculous, yet even within that, there was a glimmer of truth. Of course, there wasn't a crisis involved, it was just that there was, but not much. The incident began when Harley monitored a hack into the hotel's electrical conduit, triggering a countdown device that coincidentally showed Anton. The group debated whether to kill Anton immediately, but ultimately abandoned the idea due to Anna's insistence. It turned out that the so-called countdown was actually just two party organizers secretly activating a stage fire effect, which was banned at the hotel. The subsequent operation went remarkably smoothly. After returning Anton's phone, Anna overheard Anton's men informing her of the impending transaction. Anna immediately ordered a helicopter into the air and the crew ready. Anna's planned operation was a remarkably ruthless American strategy. They used heavy helicopter firepower to clear the trading site, then took advantage of the chaos to swoop in and reap the spoils. After dispatching all the armed men, they finally discovered Anton in the bedroom, along with an activated suitcase-sized nuclear bomb. Then, Tom, his underwear gone, appeared at the doorway like a savior, whiskey in one hand and a screwdriver in the other. With his headphones blaring with Bach symphonies and the excited and nervous shouts of Anna, Brad, and Reinhardt, he calmly deactivated the bomb's countdown. Everything went so smoothly, so seamlessly, it almost felt unreal. As for Sherlock, you might not believe it, but he listened to the communication in his headphones for 2 whole waves, unable to find his own entrance. Then, naturally, the logistics team arrived, taking what needed to be taken away, sealing what needed to be sealed, interrogating what needed to be interrogated, and dismantling what needed to be dismantled. The rest of the story, to be honest, had nothing to do with Anna and her team. After all, the interrogations and detentions were beyond Anna's control. Compared to Fabo, the K had one advantage: their prisoners didn't need to be tried. Of course, since the K was far more affluent than Fabo. Field agents like Anna would receive a bounty after each operation, which they could use to relax. Normally, the team would split the bounty equally and then go their separate ways. But this time, that was clearly not the case. After all, they were in the wild entertainment city of Las Vegas, and it would be a waste to return without experiencing it. So, these eccentrics, bypassing Anna, Sherlock, and Harley, who was clinging to Sherlock, immediately decided to imitate Anna and throw a pool party. Following the principle of majority rule, Anna and Harley's objections were completely ineffective. What? Sherlock? Sherlock wasn't a K member, so it didn't matter to him. Thus, a grand party unfolded, instigated by Laura, Reinhardt, and Bruce. Sherlock ran out to see the Las Vegas scene, and as he was about to return to his room, disappointed, he was completely stunned. A room full of men and women were dancing wildly to the music. There was even a donkey, seemingly from nowhere, slapping a beer in its mouth, demonstrating how to show off. Sherlock didn't recognize anyone in the room. If it weren't for Harley, who spotted Sherlock immediately and lunged at him, he would have almost thought he'd walked into the wrong place. After pulling the heavily intoxicated Harley off him, Sherlock cautiously began to make his way inside the party. Well, it wasn't exactly crazy, it was just a riot of energy. Sherlock saw that thief Laura was already kissing a bride who had just appeared from nowhere and was having a bachelorette party. Reinhardt, also in her own miniskirt, was clutching a heavily made-up woman. Sherlock was talking passionately about something she didn't know. Judging by her figure, it was probably a man, right? Tom was performing as consistently as ever, still slaying a swimsuit beauty with each hand, and his smoking, drinking, and dancing around were no longer as joyful as ever. Pilot Bruce, however, was quite unexpected. He wasn't sure if he'd had too much to drink or if he'd eaten something he shouldn't have, but he was battling Anna in a small arena. Even if Bruce fancied himself a savior, his Chuanyabao was still Chuanyabao. It was a pipe dream for a pilot to defeat Anna, a longtime field agent. By the time Sherlock saw this, Bruce had already been beaten by Anna for so many rounds that his face was swollen like a pig's head. However, his Chuanyabao did have a silver lining. Bruce had inherited the unyielding spirit of the anime saviors, repeatedly rising to his feet to challenge Anna's might. Anna gradually lost herself in the cheers of the people around her. She was not angry at all. She happily used this poor Chuanyabao as a punching bag and had a lot of fun beating him. The only normal person in the whole venue was the vicissitudes of life old man Brad Pitt. At this time, Brad was holding the phone and talking on the phone while eating a mouthful of fried mushrooms and a sip of wine. After seeing Sherlock, he greeted Sherlock and pushed the pot of fried mushrooms towards Sherlock, indicating Sherlock to try it. Sherlock took a bite, and you know what? It was the first time in his 2 lives that Sherlock had eaten such delicious fried mushrooms. Chapter 397, It's over. I've come into contact with the real world. It wasn't Sherlock's fault for being so inexperienced. In his entire 2 lives, Sherlock had never been to Y.N. province, known as the Mushroom Paradise. Naturally, he had no idea just how delicious the mushrooms that captivated an entire province could be. So, on his first taste of this unknown mushroom, Sherlock inevitably overindulged in a few extra bites. However, since it was fried, it was very oily, so Sherlock couldn't eat much. But as he ate, he began to feel something was amiss. First, the music, which had seemed quite loud to Sherlock, was surprisingly pleasant after eating the mushrooms. He glanced up at the DJ booth. Oh, it had changed. I was wondering, the old DJ was no good. Look at how good the music was, and how handsome he looked. But for some reason, he looked a bit like Madara from Naruto. You betcha, the more you looked at him, the more they resembled each other. Besides the clothes, the look and the expression were just as striking. Holy crap, God knows I only just time traveled, and yet I get to enjoy Madara personally DJing. And look at all those Ultramen and monsters jumping around the DJ booth, how neatly they're all dancing around. You see, on TV, they're constantly battling it out. Are you looking at Madara's glowing, spinning Sharingan? Wait? Sharingan? Sherlock instantly realized something was amiss. Isn't this the Marvel Universe? Where did the Sharingan and Uchiha Madara come from? Just as Sherlock was still dazed, a short-haired woman with a fragrant scent suddenly pounced on him. After so many days of training with Harley, Sherlock ripped the woman off him in one swift motion. A closer look at the woman's face shocked Sherlock. Oh my god, it's Miss Maida. Holy crap. I'm seeing Miss Maida, the former hard drive goddess, in the Marvel Universe. You know, in Sherlock's past life, this was the absolute king of his collection on his hard drive. The teachers added 395 and Ebot 817 were both incredibly memorable and unforgettable. Just as Sherlock was lost in thought, question marks swirled around his head, when teacher Miyota suddenly spoke to him. Harry, what's wrong with you? Why are you looking at me like that? Holy crap. This wasn't an illusion. Teacher Miyota was actually speaking to him, and it was in English. And for some reason, the voice sounded exactly like Harry's. And the most amazing thing was, Teacher Miyota had thoughtfully added Chinese subtitles to her words. Huh? Wait? Chinese subtitles? Holy crap. Sherlock let go of the teacher he was holding and quickly ran outside to observe. It wasn't a big deal, but after seeing what he saw, Sherlock was completely stunned. The night sky transformed into a Van Gogh painting, the only difference being that the moon had transformed into a gigantic, comical face. Furthermore, Sherlock even saw winged figures slowly emerging from the distorted starry sky. Wait. Calm down and think carefully about what happened, Sherlock tried to soothe himself, slapping his cheeks hard as he began to recall what had happened. Sherlock was certain that everything had been normal before he entered the room. The sky was just an ordinary night sky. He hadn't drunk any alcohol, so there was no chance he was drunk or drugged. The only thing he had ingested was the mushrooms Brad had shared. Wait? Mushrooms? Holy shit. Who the hell turned poisonous mushrooms into fried mushrooms? Sherlock's already confused mind suddenly recalled the news stories of the rabbits in Yun province seeing the figures in the hospital every year before he traveled through time. It was even mocked online as a super VR simulator or a portal to the real world. At this point, even the most clueless Sherlock knew he was definitely suffering from mushroom poisoning. Without a second's hesitation, he reached for the antidote from the exchange machine in his library. Luckily, Sherlock had placed the antidote close to the front of the machine to exchange it for Tony. With a simple tap, a flask of antidote appeared in Sherlock's hand. Concerned for his own life, Sherlock didn't hesitate to unseal the bottle and down the entire bottle. Honestly, driven by his need to survive, Sherlock hadn't even registered the taste of the potion as he drank it. Only after Sherlock had finished and everything around him had returned to normal did the deadly smell of the antidote rise up his esophagus. How can you describe that strange smell? It was like the smell of a 10-year-old, untouched dry toilet in the middle of summer, evenly rubbed with canned herrings, then covered with a sweat-soaked straw mat. Others didn't know, but Sherlock simply couldn't stand the smell. He immediately began to dry heave, and the constant resurgence of the smell finally turned into actual vomiting. So, having just experienced a mushroom crisis, Sherlock had to cover his mouth with his hands and rush to the toilet. As everyone knows, some human instincts are difficult to suppress with willpower, like diarrhea or the urge to vomit. Even for Sherlock, a powerful magician, this was still the case. Halfway through his run, Sherlock realized he couldn't reach the toilet. In his desperation, his CPU was practically smoking, and he suddenly came up with a completely unintended solution. Seeing a guy wearing a helmet and cosplaying as a Spartan on the road ahead, Sherlock didn't hesitate at all. He pulled off the guy's helmet, then hugged the guy's helmet and started vomiting rainbows. After a full half hour, Sherlock finally vomited out all the poisonous mushrooms he had just eaten with the help of the antidote. During this time, Harley ran to Sherlock with a look of concern to help Sherlock pat his back, and even found a big iron bucket for Sherlock. After seeing that Sherlock had improved a little, Harley moved Sherlock to a sofa with relatively fewer people. Sherlock, who was holding the iron bucket, looked very bad. His whole style was different from others, and it looked as if he hadn't painted anything. At the same time, a question appeared in Sherlock's mind. Damn it, how did Tony you drink this stuff like water you? Chapter 398 IQ has dropped significantly. 10 minutes had passed since Sherlock was helped to sit down by Harry. The nauseating smell that had been making Sherlock nauseous finally disappeared. Sherlock finally recovered slowly. After cleaning himself up with the water Harry handed him, he remembered that he had just drunk a potion. Since it was a potion, a certain entry would definitely appear on Sherlock's body. As a non-African, Sherlock was determined not to believe that the entry he randomly picked up would be a good one. With this in mind, Sherlock hurriedly tried to check his entry. It would have been fine if he hadn't checked it, but when he did, Sherlock's face turned green. Obtained entry, brain replacement, entry effect. Do you feel that as you age, your brain becomes less and less useful, like a rusty machine? Whenever you want to do something or remember something, you always feel like there is a thick fog covering your mind? Now, no need to worry. Brain replacement surgery has appeared. It can help you organize your brain, painlessly remove the original, useless brain and grow a qualified, healthy, and unused new brain. Of course, there are still certain small risks during this period. IQ will be greatly reduced, so it is recommended that you have someone to take care of you when replacing the new brain. Entry time: 23 hours, 20 minutes, and 50 seconds. Seeing this description that was more like a fake medicine advertisement broadcast on a small TV station than an entry effect, Sherlock was immediately shocked. Goddamn brain replacement surgery. Is this a problem with the brain? Isn't this just an aura of lowering intelligence? When the exasperated Sherlock figured out the nature of his entry, he immediately started cursing. Honestly, if a system elf or something that gave him random entries appeared before Sherlock right now, he would have immediately slammed the bucket he was holding onto the person's head. Fuck at percent, and, percent at percent. What the fuck? I suddenly feel so happy. Sherlock didn't even have time to finish his curse before the aura of mental degeneration activated. The moment the aura activated, Sherlock suddenly felt incredibly happy, his entire body becoming somewhat dazed and silly. I don't know much else, but Harley Quinn, who had been sitting beside Sherlock and taking care of him, was seeing Sherlock with such a goofy expression for the first time. After cautiously testing her, she realized Sherlock had truly transformed, and immediately, a playful mood erupted, a smirk matching Harley Quinn's. While the K-Team's party was in full swing, over there, at K's base not far from Las Vegas, it was much quieter. Rather than a base, this place is more like a comprehensive government service system, combining functions like a base, a black prison, and logistical support. It's a place not even on the map. After Anton was captured by Anna's team, he, along with a suitcase-sized nuclear bomb, Anton, the buyer, and any remaining survivors, were all brought here. The living will face trial here or be used as pawns in a series of shady operations. As for the nuclear bomb, while simple, it will be dismantled and rendered harmless. Meanwhile, in a small, laboratory-like room within the base, two workers in hazmat suits were hiding in a small room, operating a robotic arm to render the bomb harmless, commonly known as dismantling it into pieces. Of course, since this was a nuclear bomb, brute force was impossible, it had to be carefully dismantled. At first, everything seemed normal. After the box was opened, the radiation alarm in the workshop began to sound. However, as the two men carefully removed the cover, things suddenly went awry. As the cover opened, the reading on the nearby Geiger counter began to rapidly decrease, reaching levels only slightly above the natural environment after 5 minutes. It's no exaggeration to say that based on the radiation readings on the Geiger counter, even without protective clothing, anyone approaching the bomb could remain safe. However, this clearly defied common sense. With a nuclear bomb, the radiation levels would naturally increase as the bomb was disassembled. By the time they reached the actual reactor core, the radioactive material, the radiation levels should have been off the charts. How could it be decreasing as they were disassembled? The two workers quickly realized something was amiss. Initially, they thought the Geiger counter inside the workshop was malfunctioning. But when one of the more courageous workers approached the bomb with a new Geiger counter and still didn't sound the alarm, they both knew something was amiss. Without hesitation, they reported the situation to their superiors. Meanwhile, at K headquarters in Langley, Director K, having just resolved the nuclear crisis, felt relieved and was packing up for the day. After all, tomorrow he still had to face an incredibly complex internal review, so rigorous that the director even felt a little envious of Anna, who was out on field duty. Damn Nick Fury, damn SHIELD, damn Hydra. The director, after suppressing his anger for a long time, couldn't help but mutter a curse. However, before the director could even leave the office building, a staff member hurriedly stopped him, holding a stack of documents. The director's initial annoyance, upon seeing the report on the nuclear crisis handed to him by his subordinate, instantly turned to deep fear, instinctively realizing that something was amiss. Sure enough, before he could finish reading the document, the director's phone rang. Seeing the caller ID, the director's heart skipped a beat. The reason was simple: the caller ID indicated it was from the White House. The director didn't hesitate and answered the phone. As expected, the moment he picked up the phone, he heard the roar of that bastard and incompetent president. Amidst a flurry of nonsense, the director quickly grasped the key point and, not caring about leaving get off work, began to run frantically to his office. The reason was simple: the White House had just received a recording about the recently captured arms dealer Anton. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelis. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 399, Chaotic Team, Part 1. With trembling hands, the director opened the recording sent from the White House. The content was simple. According to the original recording, I believe you've noticed something's amiss. The nuclear bomb you took isn't the real thing. The real thing is still in our hands. Our demands are simple: you must release Anton and let us safely leave the Eagle Sauce, or all of Las Vegas will be buried with Anton. You only have 24 hours. I hope your foolish brains can make the right decision. Honestly, the director's head was buzzing after listening to the recording, and he immediately forwarded it to Anna, who was at the party. As for what Anna was doing, well, our veteran spy, Ms. Anna, was still beating up the ever-relentless pilot, Mr. Bruce, in that small arena. Just as Anna had knocked Bruce to the ground for the nth time, the director's message arrived on Anna's phone. Alerted by the distinctive ringtone, Anna instinctively pulled her phone out of her pocket. Anna was stunned for a moment after seeing the contact. Before she could react, Bruce, unaware of the message, seized her moment of distraction and grabbed her waist, unleashing a brutal charge. Fuck. Wait. Fuck. See bull. Caught off guard, Anna was sent flying by Bruce's brutal charge, and both of them fell into the area behind the small ring. Fortunately, Anna's phone was waterproof, otherwise, tonight's fun would have been truly terrible. Anna stood up from the pool in a rage, giving Bruce, who was in the middle of his victory gesture, a slap in the face. Only then did she turn her attention to her phone to see what was going on. It would have been fine if she hadn't looked, but the more she looked, the darker her expression darkened. Finally, she stopped turning and grabbed Bruce by the collar, pulling the battered and bruised Bruce out of the pool. Ignoring her soaking wet clothes, Anna leaped out of the pool and rushed straight towards the DJ booth, not forgetting to pull Laura, who was sprawled on the bride-to-be at the bachelorette party. Laura, interrupted, was about to explode when she saw Anna's dark face. She knew something was wrong, and, forgetting her own little hobbies, she quickly followed Anna and began to clear the party. After Anna paused the blasting music and took the microphone to announce the end of the partygoers let out a cry of despair, but they still began to leave in a steady stream. After all, it was still early, and they could still catch another party. In the wild city of Las Vegas, there was no shortage of rich people and wild parties. After everyone had left, Anna checked on her teammates, the drunken sniper Laura, the bruised pilot Bruce, and Harley, who had rushed over to help. Aside from these three, the rest of the group was nowhere to be found. Anna's temper flared up, and she turned to look at Harley, who was still relatively calm, and asked, "Harley, where are the others?" Harley wasted no time in telling Anna where Sherlock and Brad were. When Anna and the others arrived in the living room, the first thing they saw was Sherlock, sitting on the sofa, clutching a bucket, a disheveled grin on his face. Anna couldn't believe the wicked Sherlock would sport such a smirk. He looked like he had a low IQ. Seeing Sherlock clearly out of sorts, Anna couldn't care less and quickly grabbed Harley to ask what had happened. Seeing Anna's face as dark as the bottom of a pot, Harley didn't dare to hide anything and began to tell her what she knew. According to Harley, when she saw Sherlock, he and Brad were eating a bowl of fried mushrooms on the kitchen table. She tried to cling to him, as usual, but was suddenly pulled down by him. Sherlock's expression then changed drastically. She abandoned herself and rushed outside towards the pool. Once outside, Harley saw Sherlock's face turn extremely grim. Then, with a flick of her wrist, a bottle of something unidentified suddenly appeared in Sherlock's hand. Sherlock began vomiting violently after drinking the liquid, and Harley rushed to help. Just as she had helped Sherlock onto the sofa, he was in this state. Listening to Harley's explanation, Anna felt her blood pressure rise. Sherlock was the expert she had risked her life to hire, and now this expert who could handle this situation was ineffective? Anna felt like she was in Mercury retrograde. As for Sherlock's reaction, Anna could guess a little. After all, although they rarely saw each other as friends, Anna would mail Sherlock a local specialty whenever she went on a mission, and Sherlock would often reciprocate. Among them were potions with outstanding effects, but with indescribable side effects. Anna had used them herself, and the effects were truly remarkable, the kind that could save lives, but the side effects were truly inhumane. As for why Sherlock drank the potion, Anna had her own guesses, and immediately led her people to the kitchen. As Anna had expected, inside the kitchen, everyone saw Brad dancing with the air. Seeing Brad dancing with the air with an intoxicated look on his face, Anna's face darkened even further. She asked Laura and Bruce to hold Brad down, and then induce vomiting in this damn thing. As for herself, she came to the pot of fried mushrooms that was the culprit, gently picked up a bunch of mushrooms and observed them carefully, and then Anna became irritable. Fuck. Where is that bastard Tom? I told you, he's not allowed to bring those damn poisonous mushrooms with him on this mission. Where is he? I'm going to tear him apart. Following Anna's snarl, the expressions of her teammates suddenly changed. They had been treating Brad, Laura, and Bruce with relative gentleness, but now their actions became violent. Tom's mushrooms were famous throughout the K, and had even thrown the entire logistics department into chaos. But if it weren't for Tom's exceptional skills, the K would still need him. Just based on his love for poisonous mushrooms, he should have been stuck in one of the K's dark prisons, never to see the sun again. Chapter 400, Chaotic Team, Part 2. The group eventually located the culprit, Tom, but by the time they found him, he was already unconscious, naked and headfirst in the toilet. Harley and Laura tried countless methods to rouse Tom, who had fallen into coma, but to no avail. Finally, Anna gritted her teeth and ordered them to leave Tom behind and search for Reinhardt. However, after searching every room, they couldn't find Reinhardt. Even his phone was unreachable. Of all the rooms left to search, Anna's was the only one left. They followed Anna as she slowly opened the door to her room. Upon seeing the scene inside, whistles erupted. Amidst these whistles, Reinhardt's terrified cries and Anna's angry roars echoed. Reinhardt. 30 seconds. Put on your clothes and throw the thing next to you off my bed. The party's over. After a flurry of activity, Anna's team finally managed to snipe through the chaotic living room, though no one was in the best condition. Sherlock was dazed, looking like a fool. Anna was soaking wet, Bruce was also soaking wet and bruised, Reinhardt, who had rarely put on normal clothes out of guilt, Laura was drunk, Brad was in and out of his trance, and Tom was completely unconscious. Harley, whose attention was focused on Sherlock, was the only one who seemed relatively normal. Anna took a deep breath, barely managing to suppress her rising blood pressure, and clicked on the voice message forwarded by the director. After listening to the message, everyone who was still conscious realized the seriousness of the situation. They had been tricked. Everyone felt like they were popping champagne at halftime. Anne had them completely screwed. Just as Anna was contemplating how to respond to her old director, her phone rang with a video call. Glancing at the screen, Anna almost instantly let out a sharp blast. Oh my God, a joint video conference between the director and the White House. Anna glanced at the chaotic surroundings and immediately began issuing orders to her team. Hurry, get to my room. Reinhardt, find a hat to put on Bruce's head, and get him a coat. Harley, stay here and take care of Sherlock and the other two. Laura, cheer me up. You only have 30 seconds. With that, Anna rushed to her room, not forgetting to tie up her wet hair on the way. She also grabbed Sherlock's coat and threw it on over her own soaking clothes, not caring if it was clean or not. 30 seconds later, everyone Anna had called out had gathered neatly in Anna's room. She closed the door, then put on a familiar smile and opened the video call. Compared to the chaos on her side, the other side of the screen was undoubtedly much more normal. The director and the White House staff sat in a serious office, all dressed in neat suits. The moment the call connected, the director frowned slightly as he looked at his elite team on the screen. Anna, what's going on over there? Anna replied with a familiar smile. Nothing, director. I just got out of the shower after working out." After hearing Ona's words, the director raised his eyebrows and asked again. "So, what's going on with Bruce? He looks like he's been beaten up." Anna felt her CPU overclocking to the point of smoking. Her brain raced, and she finally came up with a reason to answer the director, smiling at him on the screen. "Yes, it was combat training with Bruce. As a pilot, Bruce wanted to improve his self-defense skills, so he insisted on training me." A flicker of confusion crossed the director's eyes upon hearing Ona's explanation, and for a moment he didn't know whether to object. "After all, you're just a pilot, a vehicle operator, and there's no need for you to conduct ground missions, so why would you practice combat?" But considering the eccentric personalities of these people, the director wasn't sure if Anna was just being perfunctory or serious. Fortunately, the White House staff member couldn't wait any longer. He wasn't there to hear internal gossip, so he spoke directly to steer the conversation in the right direction. "Well, Mr. Director, I think we should focus on something important instead of wasting time on these trivial matters." With the White House official speaking, the meeting finally began to flow smoothly, and Anna breathed a sigh of relief. Finally, the deception had been resolved. Anna's nervousness wasn't surprising. After all, the Chinese Communist Party, CCP, had little law enforcement authority in the United States. This mission had been assigned to the CCP according to the unspoken rule that whoever discovered it first got the credit. If anyone in the White House noticed something was amiss, Anna swore they wouldn't care about any unspoken rules and would simply assign the mission to those idiots. Of course, if the CCP was assigned to the mission, then if they succeeded, all the credit would go to them, and no one would remember their capture of Anton. But if the CCP made an irreversible mistake, then all the blame would fall on the CCP. After all, they took over mid-process and had no idea what was going on. And most importantly, wasn't it the CCP's incomplete intelligence that prevented the capture of the actual nuclear bomb, turning it into a threat to the United States? Especially with so much dislike between the two sides, kicking someone when they're down would be a minor offense. Anna absolutely didn't want to be in a situation where you take the credit and I take the blame, which is why Anna and her team members were so nervous during the joint video conference with the White House and the director. But what no one expected was that just when everyone thought the matter was finally over and they could have another meeting in peace, the unexpected happened. End of this chapter. Thank you very much for reaching the end. Don't forget to like. Looking for more exclusive content and immediate access? Subscribe to our Patreon. Remember, every like, subscription, or donation encourages us to continue. Thanks to everyone, see you in the next video.